Hello. This is Edgar Wright speaking.
And this is Quentin Tarantino.
And this is yet another commentary for Hot Fuzz. Just when you thought we couldn't come up with any more to talk about this film.
Right. My favorite film of the year so far.
Well, it's not so bad. It's nearly October.
No, you're hanging in there. You're definitely hanging in there.
When Oscar season comes round, we'll suddenly be wiped out.
March will be the key.
March will be the key?
No, not March. I meant to say December. Sorry, December will be the key.
I think we'll get wiped out. We're currently clinging on in at like number 5 in the Rotten Tomatoes mid-year report.
But
that means we're going down.
Yeah.
Because all the quality films come out at the end of the year. That's when all the prestige films come, and then we're screwed. And then the Rotten Tomato award will be snatched away from us.
And so Edgar asked me, he goes, Quentin, since we're double dipping with this extra edition and a special new ultra edition, as opposed to the super edition that was released before, they wanted some sleazy celebrity thing on it. I was happy to add my sleazy celebrity charm.
Michael Winner was not available, and so
now that would be.
I would like to hear Winner's commentary on.
Me
Hot Fuzz.
too. I mean, that actually just takes the piss out of me even being here just by bringing up the Michael Winner thing. That would be the shit.
Michael Winner would find every 30 seconds find a way to name drop somebody that he's worked with, but by Christian name only. So he would go, when I worked with Charlie on The Mechanic.
And Bert on Lawman. And on Scorpio.
When I worked with OJ on Flashpoint. Was it Flashpoint?
Yes, Flashpoint with Sophia.
He's famous in his articles for kind of like, bringing up, and particularly the one that always comes up would be Marlon in The Nightcomers.
Yeah, right.
And there'll be a picture.
What, not Wonton Ton?
Marlon's not in that, is he?
No. But Michael Winner directed it.
Oh yeah, who's in Wonton Ton?
A dog. It's Wonton Ton, the dog who saved Hollywood.
He would just refer to that as Wonton. He wouldn't say the whole name.
Oh yeah, you're right. It's Christian's name. Christian names. Keep it Christian.
What's funny is like sort of I get what's funny is that Michael Winner is I don't know, I suppose in a way sort of it's funny when we were talking about when we were doing the press for this, we were talking about the fact that there weren't any British action films, and Bond does not count because Bond, as Nick Frost quite rightly pointed out, is only in London every 4 films for a chase down the Thames. So Bond does not count as a British action
films that
film.
take place in Sri Lanka can't really be considered a British film.
Yeah, with Sony money. That's not a British film. But, there's British elements. David Arnold, who was with us only 5 minutes ago. Actually, we're in Air right now. We're in Air Studios where they record all the Bond themes, and we did the score for Hot Fuzz. But what's funny is that, there weren't any British action films. There were very few that kind of, counted. But weirdly, one of the ones that almost counts, not that it's set in London, but it was shot in London, is Death Wish 3.
Oh, yeah.
Because Michael Winner thought, I'm going back to London. I can make Brooklyn in London.
I think it was inspired by Full Metal Jacket.
Yeah.
Because Stanley had the right idea, all right? Why leave your house?
Yeah.
The South Bronx, London, who cares?
He made I'm not entirely sure where it was shot. I think it was Wapping or Hackney or something, but making Hackney the sort of the Toronto this side of the Atlantic.
Well, Robert Altman, when he shot that movie Beyond Therapy, all right, shot it in Paris for New York.
Just for the hell of it.
Just for the perversity, I think, of the whole thing.
Well, it's funny, I guess, there weren't really, any, it's funny, one thing I have to say about Quentin, and the reason that he's on the thanks list is when we were writing the script, there's a couple of things that you did. One of them was that when I was in Los Angeles and I was writing Hot Fuzz with Simon, and I happened to be over that week, and Quentin, knowing that I was writing a cop film, played me a double bill of The Laughing Policeman with Walter Matthau and an Italian cop film called Live Like a Cop, Die Like a Man.
One of the greatest titles of all time.
Absolutely.
And it actually lives up to the title. How did that happen?
Absolutely. But there was also something that you said around that point, which was something that I probably haven't told you this before, something that stayed with me during the prep and during the shoot and afterwards, is when I was telling you the idea for the film, I think I maybe told you the whole plot or part of it and stuff, and your response immediately was you can't go wrong with a couple of badass cops. And that stayed with me for a long time. So I was thinking, okay, maybe they don't get badass until the last 25 minutes of the film.
But you know, one of the things...
You've got one badass, you've
Yeah,
got badass and a half, and then they form...
Well, you know, one of the things that's actually really kind of funny about this movie, you know, a movie that this narrowly mirrors, and it's one of the ones we actually never talked about, I don't think. Except I didn't like the way they ended up doing it. Your movie actually does a little bit more the kind of the way they should have done it. Was there was The Rookie. You know, like Clint Eastwood
film.
and Charlie Sheen.
Yeah.
Now,
written by Scott Spiegel.
Scott Spiegel, a mate of ours, yes, and Boaz Yakin.
Yeah.
Both producers with me on a Hostel. And the thing about it was, when I saw that movie, I was actually quite disappointed with it because the original script, when I read it, I go, oh, wow, without it officially being a comedy, it mirrored very, very closely my favorite Dean Martin, Jerry Lewis movie, which is That's My Boy.
Oh, I've never seen that.
Oh, where it's like Dean Martin is like the classic quarterback, and he's just fantastic, and one of the big luminaries of the college, he wants his son to be like, I think it's Notre Dame or something like that. He wants his son to be a star in the football field, but his son is Jerry Lewis, so he rooms him with Dean Martin, and then the whole thing is like, obviously Jerry Lewis is really bad at football, but eventually, by the end of it, he gets really, really good at it, and it's a really classic story in that regards. And the script for The Rookie married the structure of That's My Boy. But then the movie kind of tossed it all out. Your movie actually puts that structure back in.
Well, we had this thing when we were writing, and
with Nick Frost obviously being the Jerry Lewis character.
yeah, totally. And we had this idea actually that, like, because usually in the kind of like those trailers and stuff, like, it's weird like how much of the film like, I would think about in trailer terms, like in terms of that voiceover of like, you know, Nick Nolte is a cop. Like Eddie Murphy is a cop. But I think there was a trailer that I did early on, which we never used, but there was one bit of copy that I thought was funny. Was like,
if they don't kill each other, they're gonna bust the biggest case in town.
I had this line where I sort of had it goes, Nicholas Angel is a cop. Danny Butterman is also a cop. It was like the most pathetic kind of... But we had this thing, like, in most buddy films, like, you know, in all great buddy films, the sort of, like, the two learn from each other.
By the way, I don't want to interrupt you, but just the Vitaphone thing on there.
Oh, yeah.
Every time people keep saying, I keep hearing homophobe.
When you see
Vitaphone, I keep saying homophobe. Okay, I'm sorry, I interrupted your train of thought.
The views of the people on the commentary track do not reflect the views of Universal or any of their subsidiary companies.
Or Vitaphone. Or homophobes in general.
No, there's the thing is that I like this thing of like sort of like in a way like it's like you have one great cop and one bad cop, and it inspires the bad cop to be a great cop. Mm-hmm. Like we like the idea in Hot Fuzz is that they kind of eventually make just one person.
Yeah,
like the sort of the two of them kind of both of them have qualities that the other one lacks, and it's not that they become two great cops at the end. They are like one unit.
Right.
It's like they sort of they're only good as a team. And, like, that doesn't mean that, like, sort of if they went their separate ways afterwards, that they would be any good separately.
Yeah. It's not like if all of a sudden Nicholas Angel retires, and all of a sudden Danny Butterman is going to be the man, you know, Dirty Danny.
Yeah, totally. Well, that's one of the reasons. It's funny, like, if ever anybody asks, and it's a similar thing with Shaun of the Dead, but even more so with this, is like, people sort of say, oh, would you do a Hot Fuzz 2? And I sort of say, well, it would be difficult to, because the thing is, when you do a film where somebody goes on a journey, once they've reached the end of that journey, and in the last scene of the film, Nicholas Angel, kind of the joke, to go back to Michael Winner again, kind of the joke...
As we always
do. But kind of the joke in the last scene is Nicholas Angel is like a fascist super cop. He's become that right-wing Avenger from all of those 80 films. He's got the black bomber jacket, he's wearing the shades, he's wearing the killer's gloves. He's got the black gloves on. And the thing is that sort of like, how do you start Hot Fuzz 2 from there? It's kind of that thing. That's why I thought the Matrix sequels didn't work, is because where do you go at the end of the first film when your character has become a god? It's like, you know, kind of, and the only way you can go is to throw in some doubt again. It's like, well, maybe he's not a god.
Yeah, exactly.
Then by the end of film 3, it's like, oh, okay, he is.
Well, actually, by just the very beginning of Matrix, when you see him flying like Superman, and they even make a reference to it, you're like, where can we go from here?
Yeah.
But the one thing about your structure here that you're not pointing out that's actually really kind of interesting is Nicholas Angel is a super cop at the beginning of the movie. But and it's not like, now that he's in the small town that he's just saying piss off or anything. He's still trying to be a super cop. Danny Butterman inspires him to be a super duper cop.
Yeah. Or just a badass cop.
Yeah.
And actually what you kind of... Well, that's the thing, is that one of the inspirations for the script, and that was probably the first idea that we had. I knew I wanted to make... I already had this kind of spark.
By the way, we're doing a subtextual commentary here, but I love this couple.
This is Peter White and Julia Deakin. Well, Julia Deakin was in Spaced, and Peter White is like a great Mike Leigh regular. He's fantastic in Naked, and he's fantastic in Vera Drake, and he's like one of sort of Mike Leigh's regular ensemble. He's also in, weirdly, which I was just looking up on IMDb earlier, I didn't realise, and I never got to ask him about it, Peter White is in The Bitch with Joan Collins.
No kidding.
Well, we're also featuring Bill Nighy in his first role.
Is in The Bitch?
Bill Nighy has one line in The Bitch where he says, "Flowers for Mrs. Salmon?"
I actually think that's one of the few other films ever directed by a Quentin. Quentin Masters, I believe, is the director of The Bitch.
Now, am I correct? Is it The Stud or The Bitch which has the sweet song, Love is Like Oxygen?
Ooh, that would be great. Actually, I never had any desire to see either The Stud or The Bitch, all right? But I know of them.
I've seen The Bitch. I haven't seen The Stud. The Bitch has kind of like a disco kind of setting, and it's pretty good fun as far as I remember. It also has, like any British film of that era, the ugliest sex scenes you've ever seen.
Oh, no doubt.
There's some kind of gene missing in British films to make sex scenes look cool.
Well, when you gentlemen take off your shirts during the sex scenes, your backs can be kind of dodgy.
What do you mean in the 60s? It's the same now. Oh, man. It's funny, like, sort of,
they steal the seed.
They're so, like, it's so great kind of having... really wanted to have this thing, like, where just everybody in it is really nice. They couldn't be... Which is actually, weirdly, like, I'll go back to I can't remember what I was saying before, but, like, the one thing about The Wicker Man, which is always strangely, like, not misquoted, but misconstrued about The Wicker Man, which I always think is interesting, is The Wicker Man, like Deliverance in the States, The Wicker Man has become the byword for creepy town.
Yeah.
And yet what's cool about The Wicker Man, particularly Christopher Lee, is everybody is really nice.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's the weird thing that, like, because in your head, you kind of think, in the same as Deliverance, you think sort of like, in the same way that people would, when they go into kind of like deep woods, they would say, "Oh, we're in Texas Chainsaw Country,"
exactly.
or "We're in Deliverance Country." Yeah. People in this country would say, "Oh, it's getting a bit Wicker Man now."
Yeah.
But what's funny about it is how nice everybody is, and I felt like Sanford has to be, because on paper and what the point of the conspiracy is, they are the nicest people.
Yeah, exactly.
And even their killings are done with, in sort of like for the greater good and in the nicest way possible. So everybody plays it super, super nice, but not creepy nice, just like everybody is lovely.
Well, now, one of the things, I want to kind of go back to one of the things that you were saying before is, we don't really have, proper British action films. Well, I really think you're kind of talking about the 80s there.
Yeah, that's true.
Right.
There were some in the 70s. It's only crime films.
Oh, there definitely were crime films for sure. But there was a few cop films. We actually, I have my 16 print of Callan that we watched the other day.
Absolutely, yeah.
That was one of the things when I came around Reservoir Dogs. It was I kept pushing power to the British crime films, because by that time, even in Britain, when people thought of British films, they thought of Enchanted April. I thought of the Merchant Ivory movies and stuff. But, I was constantly bringing up the films of Douglas Hickox and, like, Sitting Target, which is one of my favorite. Did we ever watch Sitting Target?
No, I still haven't seen
Well,
Sitting
you're coming
Target.
back, so we can watch it. Okay.
I got a good story to tell about that, which revolves around that, is that when I first met Edward Woodward, he was great, and I was obviously asking him
he's
questions.
a hero of mine.
Oh, you're going to meet him. Oh,
I can't wait to meet him.
We should hook up with Edward whilst we're here.
Oh, heck yeah. Okay, so you can't talk about Edward without me doing my little breaking my Rand thing.
Do it.
Yeah, okay. You asked why we shot the boar. It was under Rule 303. We found the boar and we shot the boar under Rule 303.
Edward Woodward is such a kind of icon. What's weird is that there's no other, like, I think we talked about this on the other commentaries, but, like, not only is he such a famous actor, to have portrayed 3 different law enforcer badasses, like to have done Sergeant Howie in The Wicker Man, Callan in Callan, and is it McCall in The Equalizer?
McCall, yeah.
So like he's done 3 different famous lawmen, which is kind of like the only other person I can think of who's done that is
Roger Moore?
No, your friend. You directed the episode, fucking Gil Grissom.
Oh, Gil Grissom, yeah. Well, who's the third?
William. Well, he's done.
Oh, Pat Garrett.
Oh no, I was thinking. William Peterson has done Gil Grissom, John Chance or Richard Chance.
Oh yes, you're right. Yeah.
And Will Graham.
And Will Graham, and he actually played Pat Garrett in Young Guns 2.
So he's done 4.
He's the one to beat.
He's beat Woodward.
Yeah, but you could actually say about Roger Moore, Bond, Simon Temple.
And Persuaders? What's the Persuaders character?
Brett Sinclair.
Ah.
Beat you at the British.
I have to say, I say this on record, Quentin's British film knowledge puts mine to shame. But I have to say, what's interesting is that there's a lot of British films what's really interesting when you go to other countries, and you're very good when you go to other countries, be it Australia, in Europe, that you kind of, sing the praises of the films that are kind of like that are unsung. And in some cases, these are films that just aren't that well distributed. And like sometimes...
that's true, yeah.
Sometimes there's films that are released in the States which kind of fell through the cracks and vice versa. It's weird, like something like Twisted Nerve, which we've talked about a lot, and which Billy Whitelaw's in, is like a film that, because of its subject matter, pretty much got pulled from network TV and was unavailable for a long time because of the Down syndrome subplot. It was suddenly considered very un-PC. Not that it was considered PC at the time, but the thing I was going to say about Edward Woodward is when I first met Edward Woodward, we were talking all about The Wicker Man and Callan and this TV series he did called Commoner's Muck, which he was really good in. But I mentioned the fact that you were a big fan of Sitting Target, and he said, "Sitting Target, really? Well, tell your friend he's very odd indeed."
Hey, what? I will sing the praises of Douglas Hickox forever. I'm actually quite a good friend of his daughter, Emma Hickox, who's a terrific editor, and his wife and Emma's mother is none other than Ann Coates, who edited Lawrence of Arabia.
I didn't know that. She just won a BAFTA last year.
I bet you. And but what's so great is, like, I've seen, I've loved a lot of his movies. Brannigan,
I was just going to bring up Brannigan, because that's something that should come up as a previous British cult film.
Absolutely. They called it a Murphy. They called it a Murphy. All right. And that's actually one of the best movies when it comes, like, with the British accent, the incredulous repeating of the American line reading.
What was funny, we did a thing at the ICA earlier this year. The ICA is an Institute of Contemporary Arts in London, which is right on Pall Mall, or is it the Mall? I can never remember.
By the way, I would just say, if I was going to have any other sub-character from Hot Fuzz and do a spin-off, it would be her.
Doris Thatcher.
Doris Thatcher. She would be my spin-off character.
Hot Doris.
Hot Doris.
I had an idea, like, I was thinking and this came up latterly, I was thinking, if ever I got to do another Grindhouse trailer, my Grindhouse trailer would be a film with the Andes, which would be, but like it would be shot by like a Lindsay Shontef type.
Yeah,
and it was going to be called like Maximum Tash, and it would be
Maximum Tash,
the grubbiest kind of cop film. And so like you'd have like the two Andes, Paddy Considine and Rafe Spall together, but every other scene would then be like sort of screwing strippers. And instead of their office, that
actually would be exactly like a Lindsay Shontef.
But I had this image of the two of them kind of like sort of both kind of rogering these two girls behind and like high-fiving in the air would be the end of the trailer.
Would be the freeze frame.
Yeah.
Hot stash.
Hot tash. Maximum tash.
Maximum tash.
And it would be that thing of like, as well, like one of those kind of, I mean, like a lot of those crime films from the 70s and TV shows where meetings are held in kind of like sort of strip bars and strip clubs.
In Coffee.
Yeah.
In Coffee. The big black guy that is like running for congressman, who actually ends up being the bad guy at the end, naturally, but is actually Coffee's boyfriend. He has this huge, big political meeting in a bar with a naked woman dancing, in front of one of those 70s style barbecue pit fireplaces.
Yeah. Well, there was a lot of TV shows in the 70s in the UK, like that would be, You know, there's particularly one with Adam Faith starring in it called Budgie, where
I've seen the name written before, but I've never seen the show.
Well, it was kind of... There's another series later called Minder, which was also kind of really famous, and both of them were about people that weren't criminals, but they were on the fringes. And Adam Faith kind of like... He was like sort of like a Jack the Lad, but he worked in a pawn shop. He's one of the guys who worked in a sort of like... So it was really grubby. And then Minder, he was like sort of like... He was a minder, and so he would kind of work as a bouncer or like... You know,
he's a jack of all trades kind of guy.
Yeah, protection racket kind of thing. But there would be infrequently just be scenes with strippers, which when I was a 12-year-old is why I would watch it.
Well, you know, it's funny because in America, it was one of those things where, with the exception of The Persuaders when it first came on, which, by the way, the pilot episode was directed by Basil Durden.
And the man who haunted himself.
The man who haunted himself and Khartoum.
And Dead of Night.
Yeah, and Dead of Night. Well, the greatest of all the ventriloquist movies. But actually, I would actually have to say number 2 in the greatest of, oh my God, my ventriloquist dummy is taking me over, would be Lindsay Shontoff's Devil Doll.
Which I haven't seen.
With Brent Halliday. And I've got a 35mm print. I can take care of that.
There you go. Where does Magic rate on the top 10?
I like Magic. But I actually put Devil Doll a little bit above it. Magic doesn't really deliver at the end. I mean, it's a big build. It's a wonderful build-up and even wonderful play, but it needs a great ending, and I don't think it has it. It kind of just
Richard
Attenborough's
Attenborough's just not schlocky enough.
He's not schlocky enough.
He should have got Winner in to do the climax.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
Winner on second unit.
Okay, now.
More, and Margaret show a little more flesh.
Come on. See a little tit.
And pop your top off, love.
Squeeze me out a tear. And a nipple wouldn't kill you. But now, here's the thing, though. We're taking the piss out of Winner, all right? Because...
We have a lot of respect for Winner.
No. It's a national pastime. I get it. But
no, I know. I have a sneaking kind of fondness for him in later years.
You know, it's hard to sing the praises of the guy who did Death Wish 3, The Crackdown. I appreciate that.
No, he didn't do The Crackdown. That was that was J. Lee Thompson.
That was J. Lee Thompson.
The last one he did was Death Wish 3.
Yeah, Death Wish 3. But the thing is, J. Lee Thompson, another British... J. Lee Thompson actually wrote a biography, an autobiography.
Is J. Lee Thompson Australian?
I don't think so. I think he's British.
Oh, okay.
He doesn't even have an Australian accent at all. He's very posh accent.
Is he British? Is J. Lee Thompson British?
I would bet this little tiny finger. At least a fingernail from it.
Answers on a postcard to... That's excuse enough to release another DVD of Hot Fuzz.
Yeah, that's all this. I was actually reading J. Lee Thompson's autobiography, and my biggest problem with it is when I read an autobiography about a filmmaker, I don't care if you've done 1 million movies. I want you to take time on every single solitary movie, because it won't be the big classic ones that I love of J. Lee Thompson. I like some of the junk. All right.
Oh, yeah.
I want the Passage with Malcolm McDowell and Anthony
James
Quinn.
Mason.
Yeah, James Mason. Go into detail about the Passage. I want to hear about that. But anyway, the thing about it is, I actually have to say, when I was in grade school, I really like the first half of grade school, Michael Winner was one of the first directors I knew by name.
Yeah.
Because I loved Charles Bronson. And I even had read, the first biography I had ever read was a Bronson biography in paperback. I saw it in a 7-Eleven in the book rack, called Charles Bronson Superstar. And he did The Mechanic. That's a great movie.
Mechanic is my favorite Michael Winner film.
Yeah. And there was Scorpio, starring Burt Lancaster. It was actually one of the first very action-filled like CIA American conspiracy movies. Alain Delon, Burt Lancaster, the famous Gail Honeycutt, who I met her son the other day.
Yeah.
Nolan Hemmings,
the son of David Hemmings and Gail Honeycutt.
But so it's like
Ken Cranham, who was just on screen a second ago, is in Fragment of Fear.
Oh, no kidding!
Yeah,
no kidding.
So I really have to see that now.
Yeah, I have a 60mm print of Fragment of Fear, the movie that Nolan Hemmings was probably conceived on.
What's funny is that a lot of these actors who are in here, this will probably tie into my Billy Whitelaw story, which I'll tell at the end. But
saving the best for last.
I'll say the best for last. But what's interesting is that with Edward talking about setting target. Or if you ask some of these actors about some of those old films, it's interesting in the UK that a lot of there isn't like an appreciation. It might be different in the States, or it might be exactly the same, but there isn't kind of Hammer aside, Hammer has got kind of like its own thing, but aside from that, there's sort of like a lot of actors are quite kind of like sort of dismissive of those genre films, and people don't really like to talk about it. Beyond like Edward would talk about The Wicker Man at the drop of a hat because
The Wicker Man. That's a classic.
And also in his eyes, that's a film that like didn't get any love at the time.
Yeah,
that was like bundled on. Do you know what it was the B movie too?
What?
Don't Look Now.
No kidding. That sounds like a hell of a double feature.
Absolutely, it was the B movie to like Don't Look Now. It was never like the A feature. But it's funny, like sort of like kind of like if you talk to kind of like I don't know, because what's funny is all the films that I'd want to talk to the actors who were in, they kind of be sort of like. They kind of like, sort of not poo-poo them, but like they kind of like laugh a little bit about it. Like, I don't want to ask Dalton about Flash Gordon, or I want to ask like sort of Stuart Wilson about No Escape, which is a pretty like messy film, but he's amazing in it.
Yeah.
And that was the first time I was aware of Stuart Wilson. And it's funny that all of the films I wanted to talk to them about, they go, oh God, oh. Hellraiser 2, oh dear.
Yeah, well, but that's part, actually, but that was always my thing when I would, meet actors, and also part of whether they're coming in for an audition or I just bump into them at a party or somebody introduces me to them. And part of my little thing was to bring up one of the most obscure movies from their resume, but there was always a movie I liked.
Yeah, absolutely.
And usually the response is, oh God, but they liked it, nevertheless. They were they never talk about that one. One of the funniest ones was I met at a party, Candice Bergen. And I go, I loved you in 11 Harrow House. She goes, and then her response was, everything they say about you is true.
I've never seen that film. That's Charles Grodin.
Yeah, it's a really good film.
British heist film, right?
Yes, it is very good.
That's one that I've always wanted to see, actually.
Where actually the turning point is a cockroach. I can't remember how it is. I think they paint the cockroach something, and they send the cockroach in, and it's able to get through the laser beam or something like that. I don't remember the whole deal of how it works.
But that's set in the UK, isn't it?
Yeah. John Gielgud is like the boss that he's swindling or something. I think he's a banking guy or something.
What's funny, I probably should tell this Billy Whitelaw story now.
Silent Rage.
That's funny. I can't remember who turned me. Did you turn me on to Silent Rage? Or?
No, I think you had found it before I did. But you found a loving partner, right? In the Silent Rage Love Fest.
You know who I think actually maybe pointed me in the direction of Silent Rage was actually Harry Knowles, because I think I was talking about like Chuck Norris films, and I wasn't aware. I hadn't seen that one, and I wasn't aware. Like, what's funny? We'll skip Billy Wilder for the moment. We will come back to that. But like, what's funny, and you'll be able to. What's interesting, and this kind of ties in, is that there's been some like not so much reviews, but more kind of fan comments about Hot Fuzz, and something that I find very intriguing. And sometimes people say it as a negative, or some people are perplexed by it, but they say, oh, is it just me, or did it feel like more of like it played like a horror film in the middle? It plays like a slasher film. And what's interesting is that most, like in a way, like what I wanted to do with this, and one of the first things I wanted to do is that before it becomes like a, Joel Silver, Jerry Bruckheimer, like buddy fest at the end, it is like cop versus serial killer.
Yeah.
Which is one of my favorite genres.
Right, Hero versus Terror.
Hero versus Terror is one of the worst. Hero versus Terror is probably the worst of that genre. That's a bad one. Silent Rage is a good one, but Hero versus Terror is, I've seen it and it's bad.
Chuck Norris movies are not always created equal, no matter what people think.
No, Hero and Terror is one of the like sort of like there's there's not much of the former, and there's precious little of the latter. Do you know what I mean?
But, one of the things about Silent Terror that was actually so cool about it, and it actually disguises it inside of the piece because it doesn't become super obvious. Like
Silent Rage.
Yeah, Silent Rage.
Yeah.
I'm going to say Silent Rage. But, same thing like the way M. Night Shyamalama Ding Dong, or how do you say his last name?
That's it.
Yeah. When he did Unbreakable, it's not super screamingly obvious that this is a retelling of the Superman story, but it is. Well, same thing with Silent Rage, is the fact that is actually Chuck Norris versus Michael Myers.
Absolutely. Even down to the steady, like a long tracking shot at the start.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, it doesn't scream it out, but you just have to think about this movie for 2 seconds, and it's Chuck Norris versus Michael Myers. Except Michael Myers seems to actually know self-defense kung fu by the end of the movie when he takes his fighting stance.
Now, this is funny because we, the guy who plays, is it John Kirby is the name of the killer in Silent Rage?
I believe so.
Now, that is played by an actor called Brian Libby, and we name-check him in this, because there's a paperboy called Brian Libby, because we thought, it's funny that you've got in Silent Rage, like, which is about a kind of like a supercharged, he's back from the dead, essentially, isn't he? He's kind of like, sort of like a psycho that's died and come back and has got superpowers. And the fact that the actor's name was Brian Libby, like, amused us. He's like a badass. Starring Brian Libby.
As the madman.
Superhuman killing machine, as Nick Frost would say. But what's funny is that then I realised, looking at his CV, that Frank Darabont had used him in like 3 films. He's in Shawshank Redemption, Green Mile, and he's in The Mist, which is coming out.
You could have knocked me over with a feather when you said that the guy in The Mist was...
That's John Kirby from Silent Rage. I have a theory about some of those films. I have this theory about Silent Rage and also Raw Meat, which is one of my favourite horror films, is that Silent Rage is not particularly well directed, apart from an amazing opening scene, which has this great kind of long tracking shot where there's one kind of scene which pretty much lasts like 6 minutes, and it's quite arty, and it's like taking the Halloween thing a bit further of like doing the opening shot in one. And I have this theory that on those kind of films, like Raw Meat has a similar thing where it has this amazing shot in the middle of the film, that like that shot was either done on the first or the last day of the shoot.
Right.
If it was done on the first, the producers watched the dailies and said, "What is this shit?"
Yeah. Okay.
And then said, "Okay,
Hurry it up.
Okay, medium wide, close."
Okay, I would actually disagree. Now I need to see Silent Rage again. I would disagree with it being badly directed because the
Not badly, mediocre in places.
The completely non sequitur, cliched Chuck Norris ends up fighting a motorcycle gang in the middle of the movie just to throw another action scene in there is a great fight. It's a truly terrific fight.
Yeah.
That's actually one of his best fights ever.
There's a funny bit in that film as well, which is funny, like sort of like, you know, kind of very much the pre-Avid kind of like sort of like you know, when films are sort of on Steenbecks and the reel changes are left long and stuff. There's one scene in Silent Rage where Chuck Norris is sitting at the bar with Stephen Furst, and at the end of the scene, you can kind of not hear the director call cut, but you can see Chuck Norris say his line and then look off camera as if to say, "Help me." He looks so terribly uncomfortable, and he looks off camera to the director as if saying, "Please call cut."
Okay, you know, okay. I will point out something that I would never do on a Reservoir Dogs thing, because I've never done a commentary from my own movies. But I will point out that you have to get this commentary to hear this one thing, but once I explain it to you, you'll be able to see it for all time. At the end of the opening sequence in Reservoir Dogs, coming from where you're coming from with that little story. At the end of Reservoir Dogs, there's a big wide shot of the table, and you see us all start to get up and move towards the door. And, you know, Stephen Wright starts, you know, doing the voiceover. Lawrence Tierney fucked it up so bad, so many times, that if you look to see me as Mr. Brown sitting there, I am so not Mr. Brown. I am so Quentin directing the thing and cannot believe he's actually finishing the dialogue. We're actually going to get through the take. You even hear me laugh at one of the things he says. Then you see me raise my finger as if I'm going to say cut. But then all of a sudden, every one of the actors just stood up and started walking towards the door. And you even see Chris Penn there just zoning out. I'm like, oh, okay, I guess we're all leaving. Okay.
And
got up. But you actually see my finger getting, and that's a cut. All right, and I never get to say it like, oh shit, I'm Mr. Brown. Okay, I guess we're all leaving. Let's go.
Oh man, it's funny where there's those little bits of kind of like I love that when you see those little, you know, there's that famous one which somebody pointed out in North by Northwest where the kid, like before Cary Grant like shoots the guy or the accidental shooting, and like, there's a kid putting his fingers in his ears because there's obviously like the third take and he knows there's going to be a bang. So it's like the kid is psychic. But I never that's a famous one that was pointed out to me. But it's weird, like there's funny things that like, and I'm sure it's kind of cheating in a way, but there's definitely stuff that you can do with like, you know, we did like a digital grade on this before it went back onto film. And there's like things where, you know, I'm always obsessed with kind of like making it like sort of the dialogue as snappy as possible. And sometimes when you've got like a 2-shot and you don't want to cut to singles to make it faster. You want to like sort of like snap it up, but then you can put you can put a line right down the middle and sort of like bring the actors more into sync.
Yeah,
I've done that a couple of times, and it's kind of cheating, but it works.
Yeah, yeah.
Because I sort of like, if you want to like sort of like, you know, thinking, I love that take, I love the way he says that, but I wish he said it just a little bit faster over the other thing.
I'm glad I don't know those tricks, so I don't cheat.
No, that's good. I think it's a good thing.
I don't know those tricks though. It's just that my ignorance keeps me honest.
No, it's a weird thing, like sort of.
Oh,
Like,
Robert Rodriguez is always like, oh, hey, take whatever line reading you want. You can meth it, you know, into the visual take you like, but you didn't like the line reading. He does that all the time.
well, I know sort of like definitely with those green screen films, like you hear that a lot about kind of Phantom Menace, and that is not a recommendation. Like, but no, it's interesting. There's a couple of times in this, weirdly, like on Shaun of the Dead. In Shaun of the Dead, to make the zombies more zombie-ish, like a cool thing that you can do is take the blinks out. So you can make, you know, especially like in Shaun, because there's loads of bits of things being thrown at people's heads.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, what's the first thing you do when something's thrown at your head? You blink.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, make the zombies not blink.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's like...
Oh, no. That 100% I buy. Because same thing like with shooting a gun and you can't help but blink when the flash goes off and everything. You know, that's all proper. That's good.
A couple of times in this, I won't mention any names, but like sort of like big close-up on somebody, really great line reading, but like massive cinema close-up. And you know if an actor's struggling and they can't quite remember their lines or they're struggling with something, they blink. They blink more. A couple of times in this, I did the same thing, which is cheating.
Yeah, but
Will I be thrown out of
no. Blinks are actually. I wonder why M. Night Shyamalan Ding Dong didn't do that for his performance in
That's true.
Lady in the Water.
That's true. You know what? I watched Lady in the Water, like because the Michael Caine classic Never Blink on a Close-Up, which is second only to like always make sure there is a hotel or golf course near the shoot, which is how the whole of Michael Winner's Bullseye. Michael Winner keeps coming back into this commentary.
Like the good penny he is.
I bet like Michael Winner's like Candyman. If you say his name 5 times in the commentary, he'll turn up. Yes.
He'll be
Hello.
Scoot over.
Scoot over. I've opened some port. Is Winner here? Anybody? Is Michael Winner in the building? Just be straight with us. Wouldn't that be amazing if like
That
sort
would
of
be
like
amazing.
you say Winner's name 5 times? You're all winners now. You've hit the jackpot. Here I am. Now let me tell you about Marlon on the Nightcomers.
Well, you know, one of the things that we've talked about before, that now this is definitely the case in the '60s, but it was still extremely the case in the '70s, was the fact that you know, MGM, United Artists, back when they weren't the same, Paramount, all of them, they would release movies all the time that had British settings, that took place in Britain, British directors, nothing but an entire British cast, British subject matter.
Italian Job, Alfie, they're both big Paramount films.
Yes, Hennessy, with Rod Steiger as the IRA bomb us, is going to blow up Buckingham Palace. There was all kinds of movies like that, and they never even made a big deal about the fact that they were British. You know, there wasn't a deal about the fact that Sitting Target was a British gangster movie. Oliver Reed was in it. You knew that. That didn't mean necessarily it was British. And you know, they just didn't. You know, they didn't care. They didn't explain, and audiences didn't care. You know, I mean, think about all the discussions you had just even coming out with Shaun of the Dead in America. Oh, well, Americans get it.
Yeah.
Will they get it? Now, I'm sure they probably, you know, were a little more precious about it when it came to comedies, especially like the carry-on comedies. But the normal movies, when I was a little boy and I went to see some movie and all of a sudden it takes place in London or, you know, it takes place in Ireland or whatever, you just didn't think twice about it. Yeah. I didn't think of them as even British movies. They were Hollywood movies as far as I was concerned. They had big stars. The commercials were all over TV.
Yeah, I'm not sure when that change came about, and what's interesting is that
maybe the death of the film industry may have had a little something to do with it.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely like sort of like kind of like the Hammer films and the Carry On films kind of died out around the same time. They both like died out late '70s, and like the Hammer films are pretty much killed off, stone dead by The Exorcist, and then later like Halloween. Actually, they'd already died by the time of Halloween.
Yeah, they died by the
because like sort of like To the Devil a Daughter is like 1976. They're already kind of like gone. You got a couple of ones like
The Satanic Rites of Dracula.
Well, that's probably bit earlier. I don't think that's Satanic Rite.
Well, the last one, I think the last official Hammer Dracula movie was, because it wasn't even released by it wasn't even big enough for AIP to release it. A little tiny company actually released it in the early 80s, even though it was done much earlier. I actually think we didn't get the Satanic Rites of Dracula when it came out. I think by the time we got it, it was called Count Dracula and His Vampire Brides. And it's the one that has a slight science fiction element going on in it too. I'm
not sure I've seen that one. I think I've seen of the latter, I've seen Dracula AD 1972.
Which I love. That's actually still one of my very, very, very favorites. Saw that at the theaters. Not only when their big promotion for Dracula AD 1972 was you actually got a membership card to the Count Dracula Society with a picture of Christopher Lee with blood dripping off of his fang. And so I was given one when I bought the ticket. I mean, I didn't buy the ticket. I was too young to even go see it by myself. But I was like, oh my God, this card is so cool. I went back during the movie, went to the box office and go, can I get more of them? And they gave me a whole stack. And so for about a week, I started a Dracula club in my school. I was in 3rd grade. I started a Dracula club. It only lasted for about a week or so. My interest waned, but I had the cards.
Oh, man. I don't know what sort of I suppose the sort of I know when it happened that sort of I suppose in the early 80s, maybe with things like Chariots of Fire, then between that and Room with a View, then it became the thing of the only thing that will travel is period films. And then later with For Weddings and a Funeral and stuff, it's and rom-coms.
Yes, exactly.
So period films and rom-coms, nothing else.
Well, during the 80s, I mean, literally, it was, as far as I was concerned, the Laura Ashley School of Filmmaking. The only, that represented Britain.
The only films I can think of that would travel, the only genre films would be something like Hellraiser, which again was an American, was New Line, wasn't it?
No, it was New World. But not the Roger Corman New World.
Right, the sort of post.
But oddly enough, what I got to say though, that was a weird case where its British quality worked all 100% for it, because that was every horror film had a joke, had a bit of a wink going on. That one was just bloody serious.
Yeah.
And it had been a long time since a horror film had actually taken in itself not only serious, but actually just, oppressive.
Yeah. Well, I don't know what it is in terms of
again, no one ever talks about Clive Barker, being a British director.
No. Well, I think the thing is, not only is he's more prolific as a novelist, and his kind of sort of film output is so kind of sporadic that there isn't. Because he directed. I don't even think that he directed Hellraiser, which of course he did. He did for the first one, and it's good.
It's terrific. He actually said that one of his favorite quotes is somebody said. What did he say? It's as if Hammer horror films had done the 120 Sallow.
Yeah.
And that's actually not too off.
No.
But one of the things that's also funny is you're talking about Hammer films and talking about going into the crime films. In particular that were quite popular, one way or another in the 70s that they were still coming out. And again, we're talking about movies like The Villain. And The Squeeze, with Michael Apted's film with Stacy Keach.
Our music editor on this film, David Arnold's music editor, Diane Eaton, is married to the director of Villain.
No kidding.
Michael Tushner, yeah.
No kidding.
Tuckner, maybe. And I met him downstairs when we were doing the score. He came in, and so I was sort of priming him for Richard Burton anecdotes.
Oh well, they used to show. I never saw The Villain at the theaters, but it was shown on the CBS. Evening movie, and I remember the whole week building up to it. It's just Richard Burton looking in the camera going, "What are you looking at?" It's actually one of my most favorite images of Richard Burton.
Where on earth did you get these?
Well, what's funny, I remember when we did some interviews for Hot Fuzz, and actually I think Mark Commode, who's the critic on Radio 5 Live and does the culture show, we were on a radio show with him. We were talking about it on the air. I said that
I'm sorry, go ahead.
He won't like that. He said we were talking about crime films, and I said that there weren't any British cop films prior to to Hot Fuzz. The last one I could really think of like that's a proper like cop movie with a British cop in the lead. Different with Americans because you got kind of Brannigan, and actually there was a film with Harvey Keitel which is kind of like a remake of Brannigan.
Oh yeah.
Young Americans.
Yes,
Which is
exactly.
pretty much like Brannigan, like redo.
Okay, but then you could even go to Cop Killer.
What's cop? Oh, is that the one with
The
John
Johnny
Rotten?
Rotten, yeah.
Wasn't that shot in Italy though?
Oh God, you're right.
It's not. I don't think that was actually.
No,
shot
you're
in-
right. When you're right.
But what's funny is the last.
The Young Americans is a remake of Brannigan.
I have to point out, a friend of mine pointed that out to me. It didn't really occur to me when I'd seen Brannigan on TV. It's funny, like, going back to, like, when you were doing your Richard Attenborough impression, my favourite line in Brannigan, there's lots of great lines in that, but one of the silliest ones is when John Wayne has kind of sort of said, Richard Attenborough's getting all kind of like annoyed with him and keeps going, "This isn't America, you know." And he goes, "That's right, you can't get a decent hamburger anywhere." And walks out. And then he walks out of the office. And then like Richard Attenborough and his kind of deputy are left there. And the deputy turns to Richard Attenborough and goes, "What do you think, sir?" And Richard Attenborough goes, "Well," sits down, sitcom music, wah, 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 wah. "He's an American." It's like the end of the scene. And then he goes, "Wow, wow."
Well, actually, watching John Wayne actually flirt with Judy Geeson, all right, is good for a laugh or two. You gotta love.
I remember her character name was kind of the most unsexy. It's almost up there with Olivia in this film because her name is Carol Thatcher.
Oh gosh.
Carol Thatcher.
Well,
Hi, I'm Detective Carol Thatcher.
Well, now one of the things you also have to keep. If we're going to talk about Brannigan, I got to mention two things in particular. One, make it three. All right. Where else are we going to get the chance to go on about Brannigan?
Exactly.
All right? One is the fact that one of my favorite actors of all time is Ralph Meeker, and he starts the movie off because he's like his Chicago boss. Yeah. Brannigan, get in here! All right, that's the opening shot. Any movie that starts off with a close-up of Ralph Meeker screaming in the camera, okay, that's good. Again, Douglas Hickox directed it. He also directed Sitting Target.
Theater of Blood as well.
Theater of Blood, you betcha. And also, one of the other things about it is it actually has. Well, my favorite part of Brannigan is the pub fight.
Yeah.
But and there actually is a poster of the movie. One of the B styles of the poster is a beautiful illustration of the pub fight. Just John Wayne there. He's got a pint in his hand, and he's got some other guy under his arm. He's giving a haymaker, and all these other Brits are out there like knocking each other's blocks off. It's a good poster. You got to get it.
Well, here's a crazy thing to point out about that pub fight, and this is something like to be super contextual. Something that I never got to mention on the Shaun of the Dead commentary. I don't think I did anyway. But one of the stuntman, the guy plays John the barman in Shaun of the Dead, who was a stuntman.
Yeah.
He goes into the jukebox at the end. Mm-hmm. Now, on the set, he would regale me with lots of anecdotes about films he'd been in, because he'd been like Barry Foster's kind of stunt double on Frenzy, and he'd done all these classic films. He never mentioned that he did the jukebox smash in Brannigan. He's the guy that goes into the jukebox. He'd done the same gag twice in like sort of, I was thinking...
And it never even occurred to him to bring it up.
To bring it up, that he was in Brannigan doing the same gag as he does in Shaun of the Dead. But I was watching that, 'cause I think he mentioned that he was in Brannigan, and then when I watched Brannigan again, I'd seen it on TV as a little kid.
Bloody hell!
That's Steve Emerson doing that jukebox gag. It's crazy.
Now, one of the things also about Brannigan, about that pub fight, is, and I'm not taking a piss. I am, honest to God, one of my favorite extras in the history of cinema is that bald, big mustached Royal Navy guy.
Yeah.
I love that guy. On my deathbed, I'll be able to close my eyes and see that guy. And it's actually, I think it's John Wayne's best moment in the movie. And he's like, "How about you, Navy? I'll have this, I'll have that, and get Navy what he wants." Now, the one last thing about Brannigan is the fact that John Wayne did two movies around the same time where he was like kind of doing a Dirty Harry ripoff. McHugh by John Sturges. What's very funny now, having been in Britain a little bit and talking to British film fans and everything, in America and Britain, it's completely swapped. If you bring up the modern day Dirty Harry ripoff that John Wayne did in America, and you try to bring up McHugh in America, nah, Brannigan. It's all about Brannigan. It's Brannigan. When you bring it up in England, no, it's McHugh. It's McHugh.
There's a funny thing. When we showed it at the, when I did this Hot Fuzzival at the ICA, I showed Brannigan, and they had a really good...
Yeah, Hot Fuzzival. That's really funny.
That,
it never cracks me. It never doesn't crack me up when you bring it up.
we showed Brannigan, and it was a pretty good print of it. And there was a scene. There's the scene where John Vernon is walking down Pall Mall with what's his name? Miguel Ferrer's dad, Mel Ferrer.
Oh yeah.
He has
Oh,
a
Mel
scene
Ferrer.
where
Yeah, Mel Ferrer. Yeah.
Mel Ferrer and John Vernon walking down the street.
Audrey Hepburn's husband.
Is that Miguel Ferrer's dad?
No. That was Miguel Ferrer's dad is Jose Ferrer.
Oh.
They're not related at all.
Okay. Forget Miguel Ferrer.
That's okay. He got busted at his own DVD.
That's okay. That's fine.
Corrected by moi. Go ahead. You may continue.
So in that scene, they walked past the cinema where we were showing the film. They walked past the ICA, and so one of the weirdest and best heckles somebody said, "They're outside."
Actually, I have to say, anytime. Okay, here we go again. Anytime I'm actually watching a film and the characters walk by the cinema, it's happened a few times. The characters walk by the cinema you're in. That's actually one of my favorite moments ever. And one of my favorite times was, it's now called the El Capitan. Back in the day, it was called the Paramount on Hollywood Boulevard, very close to Hollywood and La Brea. Watching Michael Winner's Death Wish 2.
Oh.
And the first guy he kills, the most memorable murder in the whole movie, starts off across the street from the Paramount.
Is that when he shoots the guy with the ghetto blaster? No.
Yeah, the guy, no, when he shoots the guy, do you believe in Jesus? Yeah, you're gonna meet him.
Right.
All right, is that guy. All right, it starts off across the street from the Paramount, and there used to be an abandoned house on Hollywood Boulevard, right over there, and that's where the murder takes place, is in that abandoned house about a block from the Grauman's Chinese Theater and the Paramount.
Right.
Again, all roads lead back to Michael Winner.
Did you ever see True Romance in the Vista?
Yes, I did.
And so that has a scene where it's like, they're
Yes,
outside!
they're outside!
Hang on, where's Jack Black? Oh, he's in the deleted scenes.
Yeah.
That's so weird seeing Jack Black in the deleted scenes of True Romance because he looks so skinny.
Yeah, I know.
It's crazy. I have to point out, there's an interesting thing here is that we make a big deal about Point Break, which is one of my favorite action films, and I don't mean that in an ironic sense. Even though there's a lot of unintentional hilarity in Point Break, I do genuinely love it. Now, what's interesting is that the DP on Shaun of the Dead, David Dunlap, was the camera operator on Raising Arizona. And I've really got like an obsession with chases through gardens.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite things in film, be it Ferris Bueller's Day Off, be it Raising Arizona, be it Point Break. And we did a little bit of it in Shaun, we did a bit more of it in this. They already had the fence jumping already. But what was funny was that, like, I showed David Dunlap, the camera operator in Raising Arizona, the Point Break chase as a reference. And he kind of watched it very dismissively. And I think the Point Break foot chase is brilliantly directed. Some of the best kind of camera operation in action.
Right. Actually, not only that, can I just one little tiny thing? That was actually even good in the script.
What's that?
Wait, that was even good in the script. If you read the script for Point Break, you put it down. Great chase in the middle of it.
Yeah, totally. But what's funny is that, like, what's funny, and he watched kind of the Point Break chase and was quite dismissive of it. He goes, that's just a rip-off of Raising Arizona. Now, that might be true in terms of, what's funny is I like them as companion pieces because, like, Raising Arizona is the funny version of the chase, and Point Break is the serious one. What I didn't realize until I saw it quite recently is both of them are harking back to Straight Time.
Yes.
Because Raising Arizona is the funny version of the chase in Straight Time.
Yes,
right
it
down
is.
to the Doberman.
Yes,
Right down to the cop jumping over the fence. It's all in there. And in fact, Point Break, it even has the same, like one of your kind of drivers are the same, Gary Busey. Although Gary Busey has disappeared in Straight Time, and that's the whole point of the chase.
Right, exactly,
But when I was watching, being a huge Raising Arizona fan, and Raising Arizona is my favorite film of all time. It's.
I never knew that till just a second.
It's just one of those films that just it touched me in a certain way when I watched it, and I kind of just know it off by heart. When I watched Straight Time, I was thinking, not just down to Emmett Walsh, but also just the kind of the tone of it, thinking, this is like obviously a big inspiration on Raising Arizona.
I never thought about that until now. And actually, now that you're saying it, actually, Max Dembo could be high.
Absolutely.
It's the wild comic version, the guy desperately trying to stay straight.
Even the look is the same. All he wants is the love of a good woman.
Yeah,
Yeah, all he wants is to kind of find a good job. But it didn't really strike me. And maybe because Emmett Walsh was in it, but once it got to the chase, the sort of the back garden chase, I was thinking, this is another good garden chase to add to my collection.
Yeah,
Now, I also had to take issue with kind of like sort of, you know, kind of like, I was thinking about it afterwards when David Dunlap was very dismissive of the Point Break chase. I was thinking, Ferris Bueller's Day Off has a chase through back gardens, and that's the same year as Raising Arizona.
Yeah.
So they can't claim all the credit for the back garden chases.
All right, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I'm trying to think if there's some other good ones that's sort of good back. Oh, Narc has a good back garden chase. Mm-hmm. That's a sort of happening 10 minutes of Narc has some good back garden chasing.
I have to say, I'm not. I never thought of it per se as back garden chase genre.
There isn't really a genre. It's just,
no, you've made it one now. Yeah. You've made it one. To me, it was always just the idea that like they go off the beaten track and through houses and over fences and stuff like that. But
it's another obscure one to throw in. Not necessarily not necessarily even the best scene in that film, but Police Academy has like a back garden chase.
Really?
When what's the guy from Fridays? Bruce Mahler, is it? Who's the guy?
Yeah. Bruce Mahler.
His wife, when he's kind of trying to get to work, she's trying to. I think he's left his case behind or something, and she takes a shortcut through the gardens and she dives over all the fences.
Okay, you know what? I'm going to be the people in the control booth, and I'm going to actually pull the plug now that we're actually going to Police Academy. I don't mind talking about. I got a few more Brannigan stories I could use, but I am going to use a little bit of taste going on here, and we're moving off of Police Academy.
I want to say one last thing about Police Academy, and this is not to sort of like dismiss Reno 911 Miami in any way. However, like sort of like for something that's supposedly the cutting edge of comedy, please tell me what is the difference between the poster of Reno 911 Miami and the poster of Police Academy 5 Assignment Miami Beach. There is no difference. And when you've got to that point, then you have to take a long look in the mirror. I'm sorry.
I think you might be. What was the name of the Moscow one?
That was number 8. Although they don't mention the 8. I could tell you all the subtitles.
Well, I want to hear them. Okay, since we've gone down to Police Academy Road, and there is a connection, I guess, with the film at hand.
I'm getting a weird sense of deja vu that I've done this before. And if
I think it was just us personally. All right.
Well, you got Police Academy. Police Academy 2 is
Back on the Beat or something.
Their first assignment.
Their first assignment.
Number 3 is Back in Training. Mm-hmm. Number 4 is Citizens on Patrol. Number 5 is Assignment Miami Beach. Number 6 is City Under Siege. And then 8 has no 8, but it's Mission to Moscow.
Oh, that is Mission to Moscow.
I've never seen.
And you know what?
5 and 8.
You've never seen.
No, actually, there isn't. No, what's number 7? Hang on a second.
Yeah.
No, there isn't an 8. Mission to Moscow is number 8.
The 7.
There must be number 7. When I was a projectionist, for 3 months. It was the year of 1989, and in fact, like sort of in Wales, where we are right now in Hot Fuzz. But I was a projectionist, and like I was a projectionist in for 3 months in 1989, and before I was basically sacked. Pretty much a couple of weeks before Lethal Weapon 2 came out. I saw the Lethal Weapon 2 teaser so many times. I mentioned it on the other commentary because that library music by John Eric Alexander, that kind of which is not in the film, is what I think of when I think of 80s action. That is the music. And he did the Die Hard music as well. So I'd seen like that teaser between all of the films. It was the Batman teaser, the Indiana Jones The Last Crusade teaser, the Lethal Weapon 2 teaser. And basically, I became a projectionist because there's all these big films coming out, and I was sacked the week before because I was too much of a liability. So the films I actually projected were Without a Clue, with Paul Freeman, who's on screen right now. Paul Freeman is in Without a Clue with Michael Caine and Ben.
That's Paul Freeman right there.
Yeah, he plays Moriarty.
Ronnie Biggs, Prisoner of Rio.
Is he in Prisoner of Rio?
He's Ronnie Biggs in it. He plays Ronnie Biggs. Yeah.
Paul Freeman has Paul Freeman's one of those actors because he was kind of sort of preternaturally like white-haired.
Yeah.
I think maybe because I always Paul Freeman in Raiders of the Lost Ark is amazing.
Yes, exactly.
And I would always me and
actually I never quite understood it. Don't worry, we'll get back to the movies from the project. I haven't lost our train. But the point being is, to be in such a big movie, to have such a big bad guy role and be so good in it, I never understood why he wasn't in like 6 Things that next year.
I don't know. I understand either, but the other thing that he was in like a year before was Long Good Friday. As well.
Well, he actually is in a movie.
He gets killed by Pierce, in fact.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you're right. Oh, he's killed in the bath.
Shower. Yeah, in the gyms. Yeah.
The thing is, actually, he was in 1982, the very next year. The next big role I saw him in is actually my favorite movie of that year. It was a movie called The Sender.
Roger Christian directed
by Roger Christian, who directed Battlefield Earth.
That's right. And Nostradamus, which my brother was a model maker on.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And I've actually, this is no joke. I actually love The Sender. It was actually my favorite movie that year, and Paul Freeman had a huge role in it. Not only that, when they showed it on television, they had to cut a few things out, so they added about 20 minutes extra. Oh, they're getting the big bit. 20 minutes extra of the film, and I actually have my very special video version of The Sender that has all the extra stuff and the actual, the R-rated version. Yeah, I used to make my own little videotapes of combining different versions together to make one Mamu movie.
I did that with Evil Dead. I brought the video nasty version and the sell-through version together.
Okay, without a clue.
Oh, without a clue. Beaches. Nightmare on Elm Street 4, which at one point was shown with the reels in the wrong order and nobody complained. Nobody even realised.
Least of all Remy Harlan.
And Police Academy 6, City Under Siege.
Okay.
With Garrett Graham, who was in that.
Okay, now since we have to... Oh, Garrett Graham was in that.
Yeah.
Yeah, he had a little... He was Mr. Cameo Man in the 80s.
Yeah.
Now, okay, I have to actually... okay, since we're talking about Police Academy and we're going to get off of it finally, but I have to say, who do you prefer? Steve Guttenberg, Matt McCoy?
Oh, Gutenberg, come on.
I don't even prefer him in his signature roles.
I think Steve Guttenberg's high point in cinema is the opening credits of Can't Stop the Music. It doesn't get much better than that, with him sort of like Gutenberg roller skating down the street with "Listen to the sounds of the city." That's Can't Stop the Music is like Gutenberg's that and The Boys from Brazil. You can't take that away from him.
Right, exactly, yeah.
That's funny. But yeah, there's a lot of actors in this, like Paul Freeman, like that people like some of them are obviously like Jim Broadbent is
oh yeah, he's ubiquitous. He's in everything.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And brilliant and everything. And there's some people that like some people that are just late bloomers, like Bill Nighy is kind of like
a late bloomer,
a late bloomer in terms of like that he didn't kind of like really kind of start getting big until Still Crazy, but. What was great doing this was like, and so funny was like, so many of the actors, like somebody like Stuart Wilson, I always thought he was kind of like famous in over here as a kind of a bit of a heartthrob in the 70s because he was in the Strauss Family on TV and he's in I, Claudius. And then like what I call the post-Rickman years, post-Die Hard, when
the post-Rickman years.
Every National Theatre actor, every like great British actor ends up as a baddie in a Hollywood film. And I always thought Stuart Wilson was one of those films that like. Similar in a weird way to his, who were you talking about with the versatility? We were talking about that about Alan Parker. That was earlier on.
In between.
That's sort of different commentary. That's coming in the edition in like 10 years' time.
That'll be in the 10th anniversary edition.
Look out for the Alan Parker edition.
The third dip.
The Alan Parker triple dip. Now, what the hell is that? There's like a fourth disc with
Alan Parker is like.
There's like a fourth disc with Road to Wellville on there. What the hell is that got to do with anything?
The Road to Wellville. I just went back in time for a nanosecond. I'm back now.
But I can't remember what I was talking about. How did that come out? Oh yeah, but like Stuart Wilson was like that sort of like almost like he's so much of a chameleon. Like, because he's in so many of those like big films, like whether it's the Rock, Enemy of the State, he's in all of those. Like No Escape, which I thought he's brilliant in it. A not great film, although another Johnny Drama role. Kevin Dillon's in No Escape, pretty much playing the Johnny Drama part. But like the other thing with like Stuart Wilson is like what's interesting. One of the camera assistants on the film during like Stuart's first scene. He was like really like bugged by the fact that like he sort of came up to me. He goes, "Where do I know the Doctor from? Where do I know the Doctor from?" I said, "Lethal Weapon 3." He goes, "Yes, yes," like that. Like it's just funny, like sort of, but it was so great to kind of like I wanted to like have this thing where like sort of just have all these kind of people who had these genre connections, and in a way we almost like didn't quite. There was a point when maybe like Billy wasn't maybe going to be in it because she kind of semi-retired, and like I couldn't kind of think of anybody else who'd like who'd been in like a who'd been in a sort of I can't think of anybody else, an actress of that age, who'd been in like a Hollywood genre film of that ilk. I mean, there was a point when my whole theory about the ensemble of the NWA and them all being kind of like having resonance as baddies, or they'd all been in genre films, was kind of going to fall apart because like you know, there was a point where sort of like Dalton hadn't been cast yet, and Billy we weren't sure we were going to get. And with the casting director, I kept coming back to the fact that it was a Billy Whitelaw time, and Billy was perfect because like. Not only she's been in Frenzy, she's in Twisted Nerve, but she's Mrs. Baylock. It's like sort of like she is, you know, and you know she's the you know, sort of Mrs. Cray. I'm not sure what the kind of the Cray's mother's name was. Answers on a postcard. I'm sure somebody in the East End can tell me later on tonight. But like, dear mother.
Dear mother.
Dear mother. I'm not going to respect the Cray's mum. I'd be like dead before this commentary's over. There'd be some pink mist in the booth. I'm thinking, where the hell did that come from? Quentin's like, these guys are serious. Maybe it was cold.
I didn't like the movie that much. Oh, it's real?
They're very nice boys, very nice to their mother.
But you're talking about that it almost fell apart. Your casting ideas.
It was so because we had a, you know, like we had some great people. We had Paul Freeman, Ken Cranham, like we had you know, and even, you know, Jim had a kind of duality to him because like sort of like, you know, like he has kind of like played sort of set, you know, in Brazil and stuff. He's not always kind of like the good guy and stuff, but like sort of like then it all just started to fit into place, and then it's like an Edward Woodward, and it's just like I wanted kind of film fans to watch the film and kind of be ahead of the curve, and I didn't mind that in terms of they're thinking, oh, the you know, and I mentioned it on the other commentaries, this idea that like sort of if you're a film fan, you know, in these kind of like I think there's a lot of conspiracy films that like sort of like use name actors in a good way in terms of you kind of think sort of like, well, that can't be it. Like Anne Reid, who's on screen now. This is the first time she's spoken. Now she's a really famous actress in this country. You know, she used to be a very famous TV actress on this soap called Coronation Street, and then she was kind of like rediscovered as in, you know, Victoria Wood used her as a comedian, and then she's been in a whole bunch of like films and like become like a really serious late bloomer, sort of like as a film actress and stuff. But like she doesn't say any, like she's the lead in other films. She's Roger Michelle's the mother and stuff, but she hasn't said anything up until this point. But when she does speak, she has the whole thing.
Yeah, exactly.
And I almost wanted people to sit there and think that like some of these actors have been wasted.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Because you do get that in Hollywood. You know, particularly you get that like. No disrespect to Woody Allen, but in something like Match Point or Scoop, you've got kind of like he's kind of done that casting where he said, "Oh, I like that actor." So you have an actor who would be a lead in something else, playing a chauffeur who never speaks. Certainly not in the cut that goes out of the cinema.
Yeah, exactly.
So British audiences is a bit weird because you're thinking, why is so and so like just sitting there?
Right.
You know, but I like that thing. So
you wanted to play against this is just another one of those Hollywood wasteful things.
Yeah, it's like sort of like they couldn't, you know, like actually weirdly, and I know we're both Tony Scott fans, but I think one of the most wasteful films like of its kind of cast is something like Enemy of the State, which has so many great people in it kind of doing nothing. Particularly Ian Hart, who's like an amazing British actor. Who, I don't know whether his stuff hit the cutting room floor, but he basically ends up being like third operative from the left.
Exactly.
And like again, he's a lead in Ken Loach films.
Exactly.
Why is Ian Hart running around with a walkie? like surely there must have been something more to that at some point.
He said yes to something.
Yeah, there must have been something there before it. And so it actually was quite a having all these big people, it actually kind of made the script had to be pretty fireproof in a way in terms of like, I mean, we did do some cutting in the edit and stuff, but like when everybody has like a cachet, that's something that comes into play in the edit because you think, oh, I don't want to cut that line out because like sort of like you know, that's kind of one of Stuart's bits or that's one of Edward's bits and actually the castle scene coming up is one of the most difficult scenes to edit because I wanted to make sure that everybody got their kind of spotlight. That nobody kind of came out of it kind of like you know, so there's definitely kind of like a joke and actually having strengthening numbers, I think sort of like, you know, most of those actors came on board when they heard other people were in it. Even if they were Shaun of the Dead fans. When they heard who else was taking these parts.
Then it's all good. They're not taking me for granted. It's that's the idea.
And what was funny was like sort of like when we did the night shoots and stuff with those actors is that like the hotel, the Swan Hotel, which you see the exterior of, which is where Nicholas Angel is staying, is where they'd all go, like sort of like 5 a.m. they'd start their night. And so there'd just be funny image of like going into that hotel and seeing Billy Whitelaw, Stuart Wilson, Ken Cranham, and Timothy Dalton sitting around a table having a drink at 5 a.m. And the day that like Peter Jackson was on set and did his Santa Claus cameo, he was just down for like a day, like when he was in the UK. And the night shoot finished at 5 a.m. In Wales, in my hometown, I was like, you walk anywhere. There's no, it's only like a sort of mile diameter, the whole place. So I could walk to my flat I was staying in. I was walking down the street, and like the only other person walking like that time in the morning, like 5 a.m, place completely deserted, is Peter Jackson walking back up the street, which is such a surreal image. And so like,
okay, has weird. I've actually bumped into Peter Jackson on the street one day. Not here. It was like by the Beverly Center in Beverly Hills. I was walking down there. Hey, Quentin! I turned around, it was Peter Jackson.
That's the sign of like a non-Angelino. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Walking. But here's the funny thing. So I took him. What was the funny? I took him around. I sort of wasn't ready to go to bed yet. It's 5 a.m. And the sun was up. It was like June, and I said, "Well, why don't I show you around?" So I had a walk for like an hour and a half with Peter Jackson around my hometown, showing him all the sights. Still with the place completely deserted. And eventually we'd go back to the hotel and say, "Well, why don't we have some like tea and sandwiches or something at like 6:30 in the morning?" So we come in. And everybody's there, like sort of Dalton, like Peter White, Stuart Wilson, all singing around. And a lot of them went to college together. A lot of them went to Rogers together in the same year.
Yeah.
Like Timothy and Kenneth Cranham in the same year. Like Anne Reid was sort of like around at the time, but was younger and had a crush on Stuart Wilson when she was younger. Billy was like 10 years older than most of them, and she was already like a kind of like I remember Ken Cranham saying that like. Shirley Ann Field was like the UK's Doris Day, and like Billy Whitelaw was like the UK's Jean Moreau. She was like the arty sex symbol. And so like Ken Cranham was like sort of saying that when he was like 20, like when he was 16, Billy Whitelaw was like one of his pinups. And now like sort of it's like now they're he's in his 60s and she's in her sort of 70s and stuff, and it's just kind of they're all working together. So what's funny, like sort of, and Billy is such an amazing kind of like sort of presence, and kind of like just a sort of like. It's a force of nature, and she's so fucking funny, and she doesn't really kind of like sort of she just did the funniest thing to me and Peter Jackson is that she didn't really know who Peter Jackson was, like Timothy Dalton did and Stuart Wilson did, and they were all having a nice chat the night before, and then like we went in the morning, like sort of, and Billy comes in, she's got out of makeup and she wants to have like a glass of wine after a long night shoot, and me and Peter go in and we're queuing up, and there's just one kind of guy behind the desk. And the guy behind the desk says, and Peter says, I'll just get some tea and sandwiches. And Billy Whitelaw comes in and he goes, right, I want a fucking glass of red wine, and I want my fucking glass of red wine before he gets his fucking sandwiches. Which was classic.
Okay, you have to tell the story about going to meet Billy Whitelaw and talking her into doing the movie.
Well, here's the thing, and this is where also your other like part of the thanks list is that when I was casting the film, when I was kind of getting through this thing about the kind of the living legends who were going to be in it. Billy Whitelaw was sort of like, I've been sort of circling around her, and we kind of been told that she'd retired, and then I kept going back, and then. Because we kept pushing it and stuff, like her agent got in touch with her, and then I was going to have a meeting with her. And I was really, nervous because she's kind of like a really iconic in this country. And I knew that Quentin was a huge fan of her in Twisted Nerve and a huge fan of that film. And
so sexy in Twisted Nerve. She actually might be one of the first big British MILFs, all right, in that movie.
I'd like to say in Hot Fuzz she's become a gilf.
I'll buy that.
I say that on record.
A gilf.
Billy, if you're listening, call me.
Yeah.
And hang on, I'm buzzing.
You get a text.
Where are you? XO. Billy doesn't text. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, that's the crazy part about that story. Continue.
So, I was going to go around now. Twisted Nerve, as we mentioned before, is one of those British films that in this country just kind of, until recently, it just got re-released on DVD.
Oh, really?
You just couldn't get hold of it. And I'd never seen it. It was very rarely on network TV. And I knew I was going to meet her, and I was a big fan of her anyway. And because you'd always said about Twisted Nerve, I thought I'm gonna track it down.
And by the way, the only reason I remember when Twisted Nerve came out briefly when I was a little kid. I have a memory of it, and I had a trailer for it in a collection of horror film trailers that my video archives had for a long time, which was really kind of a cool trailer. But then I never saw it on video or on TV. I only got it because it was one of the prints I got my first year of collecting prints.
Right,
and it's even a pink print at that. And the film is still magnificent. I do a film festival in Austin where I take about 30 of my film prints over, not movies, my movies, but collection show other movies. And to this day, I've been doing that for over 10 years now. Twisted Nerve was one of the biggest hits I ever showed at Austin. I mean, literally, people from the Austin Film Society go, is that movie considered a classic? Is that considered like one of the great thrillers of all time? Because it is. Where is its place in cinema history? And I go, nowhere.
I know, and especially in this country, nobody even really knows about it because it kind of like, it just, it was interesting in the same way that kind of like sort of, Hitchcock got derided a little bit after Psycho. Like, Michael Powell and the Bolting brothers after Peeping Tom and Twisted Nerve really like sort of like in Michael Powell's case pretty much people said that was the end of his career after Peeping Tom. And the Bolting brothers like did Twisted Nerve and it was equally sort of considered like almost like sort of like close to not it was pornographic but it was like sort of with the kind of the press over here was like what the hell are they making these sleazy horror films for?
Right, exactly. And a country that like puts good taste before all others. All right. Here's a movie that's just going fly in the face of that.
Yeah. So anyway, I tracked down a copy of Twisted Nerve from one of those disreputable kind of like sort of laserdisc bootleggy places. I say on record, I would never suggest doing that unless you really can't get hold of the film, which I couldn't.
Which is the case for Twisted. I say go ahead and do that anytime you want if you can get hold of it.
If you can't get hold of it anywhere else.
I wouldn't have any of the Shaw Brother movies I would have if I didn't have the bootlegs.
The only other one that I've got like that is the Super Cops, which we'll come back to another time. But anyway, so I watched Twisted Nerve and I fucking loved it and it was great and it was just really and even just down to kind of like just anytime you see one of those kind of like genre films filmed in the late 60s, just the location work is just amazing and just mind-blowing to see. Peeping Tom, like, we used to be like where I edited the stuff, where I edited the first series of Spaced. Around the corner from that is the pub where the first murder in Peeping Tom happens.
And again, just to highlight what we were talking about earlier, again, Twisted Nerve takes place in England. It's not a thing.
Yeah.
All right? They're just walking all over England and everything. Again, not a thing. There's not a big deal about the movie, actually, but it's a very big deal about the movie when you watch it. But, it's not, doesn't have to be British per se. It's just a good thriller.
So here's the thing is that I remember when I was doing the location scout, I spoke to you on the phone, and I think maybe you were in Iceland. Or you were somewhere. Anyway, I spoke to you on the phone for a long time about casting whilst I was doing a location recce. And I said about Billy Whitelaw, I said, I watched Twisted Nerve and I'm going to see her and I'm going to meet her and stuff. So I went round to her house and we had kind of like a discussion about the script over a glass of wine and she's very, very lovely and she kind of reminded me a lot of my grandmother, who's no longer with us. And so I was having a lovely chat with her and I said to her, oh, Billy, I watched Twisted Nerve the other day. And she goes, oh, darling. She goes, really? I said, it's great. That's become quite a sort of like a cult hit. She goes, really? Oh, I can't really remember much about it, darling. I said, and I'd read somewhere that she'd been nominated for a BAFTA for it. So I said, but I thought you were nominated for a BAFTA for it. She goes, oh, it was that and something else, darling. So she's being very sort of like dismissive of it. And then she, like I said, but it's kind of become kind of like, a thing. And like Quentin Tarantino kind of like often talks about it and kind of raves about it being one of the best, British films of its era. And she goes, really? And I said, yeah.
That's extraordinary, she said.
Well, this is the thing. I said, really? Oh, really? And I sort of said, I said, the music has been kind of like popularized by, he used it in Kill Bill Volume 1, and like, it's been sort of like the soundtrack for that, like aside from the film, the soundtrack was like a platinum seller, so like, everybody knows that whistling music from Twisted Nerve, the Bernard Herrmann score. She goes, darling, I can't even remember the theme of Twisted Nerve. So I said, oh, I've got it on my iPod, I can find it. So I thought sort of like, I'm going to jog her memory and play her the Twisted Nerve music. Bring out my iPod, I've got the dial in front of me, I'm sort of dialing around, and then Billy Whitelaw's hand kind of stops me dialing and says, darling, I don't give a shit about Twisted Nerve. And that was the end of that conversation. So in terms of actors as being dismissive of their genre output, that one takes the cake.
Well, actually, I think every time you used my name to preface how much I liked the movies, that was their cue to say, fuck all.
No, I think in Edward Woodward's case of Sitting Target, I think he was actually genuinely flattered.
Good.
He was, and actually, I think I told him, I mentioned to him that like we'd watch Callan or something. I don't know if I mentioned this.
Oh, you just wait. Shit's about to get real.
sorry?
He said, shit's about to get real.
No, I want to find out. I've made it my quest to find out who wrote The Shit Just Gets Real in Bad Boys 2, because Bad Boys 2 has an interesting lineage of writers. Like Bad Boys 2, the credited writers, there's like 3 credited writers. There's like Ron Shelton, Jerry Stahl of Permanent Midnight fame or infamy, and I think George Gallo, who was one of the writers. But I heard, and I've yet to have this confirmed, and I'm going to find out, that somebody who did a polish on Bad Boys 2 was Judd Apatow. And he did like a punch-up on that script. And I heard, somebody told me a story about him, which I've never asked him about yet, but I've got to know him a little bit recently. I'm going to ask him about it. But I heard that he had to go, and not only did he do punch-up, but he had to go and pitch the jokes to Martin Lawrence and Will Smith in their trailer, and they said it was one of the most excruciatingly embarrassing because he had to read out the jokes to them.
Yeah.
He's thinking, you can do this better than I write it down and you read it back to me. I'm not going to sell these as well as you will.
I say this with all the love of my heart. A bunch of talented horrors had a big vacation that year.
What's funny, like, I do find what's funny about some of those films where there's a lot of kind of like, one film like, this is in a similar vein because it's a Bruckheimer film, Armageddon, I thought was an interesting one because it had something like 7 credited writers and God knows how many other people doing polishes and stuff. And there's a thing, I swear to God, like, I don't know how many like rainbow pages they had in terms of different kind of like sort of, you know, when you write new drafts of things and revisions, it's a different color each time. So if a film kind of has rainbow pages, you know it was a treble production or there was a lot of rewrites. But in Armageddon, I always find it baffling that there were nobody ever did like a sort of an overall kind of read through the entire thing. Because at one point when they're on the asteroid, somebody comes out with the zinger. This is like Dr. Seuss's worst nightmare. Literally 2 minutes later, somebody says, this is like a surrealistic nightmare. And I'm thinking, did nobody read through the script and say, yeah, maybe just take one of those out?
Yeah, maybe not 2 nightmare references.
Yeah,
You know?
let's leave the Dr. Seuss one and forget the surrealistic one. It's kind of the same joke. In fact, maybe it was the same joke. What draft is this?
Yeah, right. Exactly. You know, it's funny. I've only done one, but the very first thing I was ever, the first dialogue polish I was ever hired to do way before I ever directed a movie was a film called Past Midnight with Rutger Hauer and Natasha Richardson, which is sort of a poor man's Jagged Edge. But after I became known, I was hired to do. I was hired and I was paid a lot of money, but that wasn't when I did it. I did a dialogue polish on Crimson Tide. For Tony Scott, and basically because I love Tony Scott. I just really, really love him. This is in the same vein of what we're talking about. In fact, I can't say no to Tony Scott. That's why whenever Tony Scott's making a movie, I don't answer the phone if he ever calls, because I know I won't be able to say no to him, but I know I can't do it either. But that was my one time doing something like that. And I couldn't be prouder of Crimson Tide, and I was happy with the work in it. But at the end of the day, it was literally at some point, and they paid me a lot of money, at some point I was like, I will give you all the money back. Plus, here's another $100,000 to just fuck off. You're gonna make money on this.
Now, what was it? Did you have an 11th hour sort of attack of the nerves about it, or you just didn't want to be involved in it?
No. It was just look, when it comes to this kind of stuff, when it comes to writing, I don't work for a living. It's mine. I do it mine. My own deadlines are my deadlines. If I make them, I make them. If I don't, I don't. It's very, very organic. That's the first time I ever had this kind of pressure. And then they totally was one of those things where they hired me. I had 3 months to do a 2-week rewrite. Well, naturally, I don't start until a week and a half before I got to hand the goddamn thing in. Now, a good trick about that is when you're a little late, by the time you give it to them, they're so fucking happy to have anything at all that all of a sudden it seems brilliant. But But
Don't hand it in too early if you don't want to get notes.
Yeah. There you go. You have Don Simpson calling me up. Oh, these speeches with Gene Hackman. This is John Ford time. But the thing about it was, I think the guy's name was Michael Schufler or something like that. He was he was a good writer. That's why I kind of did it. He had a good script. Very good story. And he's the one who gets the credit for it. He came up with the idea and he wrote the script. All right, it was him, it was me, and then it was Robert Towne came in and did a couple of scenes. For a Bruckheimer film, that's practically written and directed by one person.
Right.
When it comes to the high-paid rewrites and everything like that, that's very puny. That's very small for a Bruckheimer film.
Me and Simon were asked to do a rewrite on Doom once, and I think we were busy. But I was saying later, so somebody asked me in a Q&A and said, "What would your version? What would be your dialogue additions to Doom?" And I said, "Left, right, fire, in the corner."
Let's get the fuck out of here!
That one was in the film. That was already there. That was already gold. No, it's funny, like, it's weird, like, there's definitely a thing in comedy recently where there's definitely a thing with a lot of comedy films where they have a lot of people pitching in and they have the things of, like, punch-up sessions with lots of comedians and comedy writers. And in some ways it kind of works in terms of, especially if it's a more improvisational film. But one of the things, it's funny, I always kind of think, and I was talking about with Mike White about this, and I'm sure you feel the same way, is that I directed Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz, but always my biggest point of pride is if somebody kind of quotes a line back to me that I wrote.
Yeah.
It's always that's kind of the coolest thing. It's
I
like
know.
sort of like if somebody quotes something to you or asks you to write something, if you're signing something, that's always cool because you think, I wrote that, and I sort of like I would not like to get into a situation like that where the sort of my authorial pride is like, kind of like that's gone, it's like sort of, and it, like in a way, like, sort of it makes it sort of not just doubly hard. It's like sort of like writing something completely from scratch and not having any kind of jokes coming from outside is really tough, especially if you're trying to keep the kind of gag rate up. But at least they're all yours.
They're all yours, but also, they're gags, but they're gags with integrity. That's why they're there. And also, look, and the thing about it is, you're a terrific writer, and Simon's a terrific writer, and you guys are a magnificent team.
Thank you.
It's like, you don't need to spend you don't need to throw cash at the fucking wall, all right, to have somebody, have some slumming comedy writers coming in for a big payday just to throw a couple of jokes your way that they don't feel good enough to hold on for themselves.
Well, it's an interesting, like, I mean,
Cut to a year from now, you're the slumming comedy guy. Well, that second house would be nice. I gotta pay for the ex-wife, all right? Alimony's coming up,
How about this? And how does this float your boat? Maybe the shit didn't get real. It's
a twist.
It's that twist. It's that second act pinch. It's like sort of like they're down. Are they out? Are they gonna make it back? That's what sort of like it was funny. There was a discussion like we had a test screening in New York and it tested really well. But
for Hot Fuzz?
Yeah, for Hot Fuzz. We did 2 test screenings, one in outside London and one outside New York in Long Island. And in the New York one, it went really well. But I don't know if you've been through this process, but like there's one thing at test screenings, they do ask very leading questions.
No shit.
Yeah. So and the leading question this time was like, and what do you think of the title? So then, like, as soon as that got asked, people in the focus group who'd given it like an 80 score, it was in the 80s, so it was really good. And like, there was 2 like sort of like elderly sort of New York sort of elderly Jewish ladies sitting right at the front, and they were the first people. What was funny is the first thing that came out said, "What did you like about the film?" And these 2 ladies said, "We like the scenery." Like, we just trashed this fucking town, and the one thing that you like was the scenery. Well, that's good. That's fine. It's still picture postcard. That's good.
Yeah.
Anyway, so like once it got asked about the title, then it's sort of that threw a cat amongst the pigeon. People say, "Yeah, I don't know what Hot Fuzz means. Is that a British expression? What is that?" I mean, to lay it to rest now, for once and for all, fuzz as slang for the police is a New York expression, and it came from one of the many. There are conflicting opinions, but the one I like the best and the one I'm sticking to. It's not necessarily true, but the one I'm sticking to.
But the one that you like.
Yeah, the one that I like is that in the 30s, the police force was mostly Irish, and they, kind of had de rigueur, had beards and moustaches.
Yeah,
And
the
it'd be
mutton chops or something,
here
yeah.
come the fuzz, the face fuzz.
Here comes the fuzz.
Yeah, so
I had no idea that was where it was from.
That's one of the explanations.
Yeah.
That's the one I'm sticking to. Mm-hmm. The hot bit is
it's the
Simon Nicker hot.
Yeah.
Like, that's it.
Which goes without saying.
That goes without saying. But what's funny is that, so, like, there was a bit of, and then there was a bit of kind of like doubt in terms of people sort of saying, yeah, I didn't really get the title. That's the one thing. Would that put me off? It sounds like a porn film. Like, sort of people
Well, that's kind of the fun of it.
Yeah.
That's the play on it.
They don't get to make what was the porn version of Pulp Fiction? Blunt Fiction?
No, Pulp Friction.
And Drill Bill?
Drill Bill was the gay. Kill Bill. Yes. Drill Bill. There's also a non-gay, a heterosexual porn called Thrill Bill.
I'd like to make a gay one called Death Poof.
That would be the that would be the. Oh, yeah, that would be. Okay, or you could be the scatological section.
Death Poo.
Death Poo.
Oh my god! I like the idea of Scatman Mike.
Yeah. Dun-dun-dun.
That's why I get paid the big dollar.
Nothing like the classics.
So I'm doing my own punch-up shit. I've already sold out on my own commentary. The thing I was gonna say was anyway. So there's a whole.
Hold on. I think one thing when you were saying, hold on to that, but the the market research screenings. I'm lucky because I've had enough success that I can say I don't ever have that guy.
Yeah.
That works for whatever the Joe Franklin or whatever the hell the guy's name is, that does the Joe Farrell, that does the little introduction thing and asks all the leading questions. And that guy don't exist in my thing. All right, and
Joe Franklin is the Girls Gone Wild guy.
Yeah, exactly.
He doesn't do any test screenings either.
Yeah, actually, where he did. No, the guy's name was Joe Farrell. Used to run that company. But the thing about it though is there's like always some like dweeb in the front. And again, they're asking stupid questions that you don't want to hear the fucking answer to, that are leading no matter what, because people ask a question, they want to answer it. All right, what's your, what scene did you like the least?
Yeah.
What character did you like the least?
Now, the one thing that's weird there, and this happened on Shaun of the Dead, it's a strange thing with test screenings, is that in those focus group things, it says, which character did you like the least? Now, it doesn't make any distinction between whether you didn't like the actor or you didn't like the character.
Yeah.
In Shaun of the Dead, the lowest ranking people, or which ones that they liked the least, was Bill Nye and Pete Saravanovich. Mm-hmm. Now, that's because they don't like the characters.
Yeah.
The characters are nasty.
Yeah.
And they kind of get their comeuppance. Now, there's a funny thing, this is really funny, is I'm gonna get back to the thing about the title in a second. One funny thing happened in the first test screening of Hot Fuzz. Mm-hmm. When we tested Hot Fuzz now runs 120 minutes. And the first time we tested it long and left everything in and tested it at like 2 hours, 20 minutes. Now, I always wanted it to be 120 minutes dead on.
Now, where did you test? Are you talking about in the UK?
In the UK.
Okay, yeah. Uh-huh.
I tested it at 2 hours, 20 minutes. And like, and I wanted to test it long because obviously with comedy there's some jokes that you want to try out and see which ones kind of work, which ones don't. And I never wanted it to be. I wanted it to be 119 minutes. If I'm absolutely truthful, I couldn't quite make that work. And I just wanted it to be under 2 hours. It's 2 hours dead on. Anyway, so in the first test screening, which is in a place High Wycombe, which is outside London, I didn't go to the toilets before screening. Mm-hmm. Half the way through the film, I really need a piss bad. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking, I'm surrounded by the executives of the film. The cinema is completely packed. Also, the entrance is at the front of the screen, so I have to walk down and back if I go to the toilet.
And you don't want to start a...
No. So I was thinking, what the hell am I going to do? Because I'm thinking, I can hold out. I held out for half an hour, and then I'm hurting so bad. I need to piss so bad. It's like feeling like it's fossilizing inside my body. It's really, really painful. So I'm thinking, what the hell am I going to do? It's coming up to the castle scene, which was like a longer version of it with a lot of exposition. I'm thinking, I'll go out during the castle scene. And I was thinking, no, that's exactly what they'll be expecting me to do. I can't go out during a long talky bit, because then they'll say, well, even you had to go to the bathroom during that. So you know what I did? I waited until the supermarket scene, the loudest, fastest cut, bit that I knew that would really play, and then I went to the bathroom. So then everybody's going, where is he going? It's getting big laughs. So then they kind of thought I had a heroin problem or something. And it's like, sort of like, what is wrong with Edgar? Like, the film's killing and he's gone.
He has a problem with success, Edgar.
This isn't supposed to be a comedy. This is my dramatism, my mature work. Why are they laughing? Why is this being pitched as a comedy?
Well, one of the things that I get the piss taken out of me forever is not only have when it comes to the market research screenings of my films, not only do I not have that guy out there talking, I introduced the movie, and I whoop the audience up. And my producers will tell you, not only do I whoop them up, I shake everybody's hand as they enter the cinema and ask them by name.
That's fair enough.
I think I am filling in for hopefully 3 weeks of advertising would do.
There was a thing what I was going to say is that the punchline to the thing at this test screening, after this Long Island test screening, is there was the big discussion afterwards was that the scores were really good, people liked it, and then they sort of said, what about the title? I mean, maybe we should call it Hot Fuzz. And at one point, one of the executives
Hot Fuzz what?
They were sort of saying, can we call it Hot Fuzz something else? Like, can we call it something else? And it's already been on the internet for 18 months. I said, there's no way we're changing the title now. And they sort of said, well, if you could change the title, what would it be? And I said, well, Bad Boys 3. It isn't far off Bad Boys 3. I would, Jerry Bruckheimer, if you're listening, I would direct Bad Boys 3 in a heartbeat.
I'd see that in a heartbeat.
Yeah, absolutely. You know what?
Okay, remember though, when we had this screening in Hollywood, we were giving away Point Break, copies of Point Break, and copies of Bad Boys 2 on DVD as part of the Hot Festival vibe.
Yeah.
Point Break, gone.
Yeah.
Everyone snapped it up. But we still had Bad Boys 2 left. And they were going to end the question and answer session. And like, wait, we're not leaving until all the Bad Boys 2 DVDs are gone. We couldn't give them away.
People don't. You know what's funny? I also kind of like, as part of the Hot Fuzzival, we showed like the Danny Butterman double bill. We showed Point Break and Bad Boys 2 back to back. And I kind of like sort of fell foul of my own kind of, I suppose, I'm sure you'd like to think of like double bills as being like preparing a great meal. Mm-hmm. Well, this was like having 2 kind of KFC bargain buckets. It was too much, because in Bad Boys 2, I fell asleep and I was sitting at the front and somebody called me on it. They said, you fell asleep in Bad Boys 2. I said, I know it was late, and I was kind of, as the connoisseur of like creating the perfect double bill, would you agree that the second film in a double bill should never be longer than the first?
I would agree with that. Now, I've never brought it down to an exact science, but I think it's maybe an intrinsic thing in myself. But also, the films can never quite be that parallel with each other, which is part of the problem that most revival houses have. They don't show a Marx Brothers film with something that could be comparable in a fun way. They always show 2 Marx Brothers films.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, 1 Marx Brothers film for an evening is enough for me.
Yeah, you can only eat so much chocolate.
Yeah.
But that was the thing, is like watching Bad Boys 2 after Point Break is like, Point Break is like 110 minutes. Bad Boys 2 is 160 minutes long.
Yeah.
It's 2.5 hours long. And it was.
No, Bad Boys 2 definitely needs to be shown first.
Yes. So it was a mistake, and I apologize. And so the guy who called me on it for falling asleep is totally right to do so. It's funny, like, sort of, in this bit here, like, going back to Tony Scott as well, like, we use quite a lot of, like, hand crank camera stuff. Mm-hmm. I really like sort of the sort of stuff that Tony Scott did on like Man on Fire and Domino, like sort of, and just I always like sort of like.
I'm a big fan of Domino. That was one of my favorite movies that year, actually.
Well, we're the only 2 members of the Domino fan club.
Yeah, I know.
Like 2 old men playing dominoes in the corner of a pub.
It's an exclusive club, but very respectful.
We'd like to invite Tony Scott into the Domino fan club.
Yes.
But what's interesting, like, it was really fun shooting this, and what was funny, like, is I had kind of like, for a lot of the action stuff, had 3 different operators, and it was kind of fun, kind of like the different operators having different skills and kind of like sort of treating them like actors in terms of you knew what kind of like bases what they'd be good on. Like,
hey, that's a really cool thing. I've never thought about that before.
Yeah, we had Peter, who was like our camera A, and he'd do the kind of the master shot, which is like the classy kind of like shot. And he was a Steadicam operator as well. And there was a guy called Peter Field, who kind of could do all the kind of the nice crash zooms and kind of all the whip pans. And then Jess, who was our actual DP, who would get on the operator, who is a brilliant operator himself. He would do the crazy shit, and he'd be the one doing like the Man on Fire cam and doing hand cranking and double exposures, and And there was something cool about doing double exposures in camera and hand cranking, because when you got the dailies back, it gave you the same buzz as when you used to get Super 8 back, because like we didn't do any of this in the online, didn't do any of this in post. It was all done in camera. And what's great about that, like when you do the double exposures are all done in camera, and when you get it back, it's like, that's it.
Yeah.
And it's so exciting. And whenever the dailies would come through and it was going to come up to a hand cranking or double exposure, you go, ooh, ooh, ooh.
Yeah,
and you
yeah.
might like shoot for like, 2 minutes and have like, 2.5 seconds of something cool, but it's worth it,
But yeah, but like that's okay. So when's the hand cranking stuff coming up?
In this.
No, I mean
Oh,
when you're sitting,
in
when
the
you're
dailies.
sitting in dailies.
Yeah. Well, what's funny, what's funny, like in this is like sort of like, I particularly when I look at kind of like other kind of action films out there, like one thing that was kind of tough with this was like sort of like I tried to use the sort of principles as much as possible, and there's some points where I like if I'd had a bit more time and stuff, I'd like to use a few more kind of stunts to do some of the things more for real, like, and not kind of like sort of, because there's a definite reliance now in a lot of action films on having digital stuff, which I know you're very against, in terms of like sort of like using the performers and putting them in situations which they couldn't do, like for insurance purposes and stuff. And I'd like to have done a bit more kind of rough and tumble in some of these scenes, but I'm kind of like happy with what we managed to do within the budget, like and the coverage that we got within the budget, and the lighting. I think like this is one of the most Tony Scott style scenes to me. Like, Jess did such an awesome job with this backlighting and the sort of like the kind of the smoke and stuff. It looks totally sort of like Now,
did you actually have to make a decision about okay, now do we go the whole Tony Scott way with the smoke, or is that going to affect the comedy? And even as far as atmospheric photography is concerned, is that going to affect the comedy?
Well, it's interesting. There's definitely like a thing. There seems to be like sort of and it's funny, like sort of I read somewhere Barry Sonnenfeld in an interview once said long lenses are not funny, wide angles are funny. Now there's something in that, and it would be a thing that's sort of like, but then we try to kind of like sort of mix it up so that some of the kind of the more awkward character stuff is done on a wider lens, and then some of this stuff where it's going as the film goes on and it's going more into kind of Tony Scott kind of kind of style land. There's more kind of long lenses like here and stuff. So we kind of like sort of the idea is the film morphs into that as it goes along. So we use more long lenses later as it starts to become more like the action film. So we did think about that, and then we have like the lenses, and sometimes it would be like sort of if you're doing kind of like a funny, if it's kind of all in this kind of like dramatic kind of mode where everything's deadly serious and kind of and the joke is in the fact that it is po-faced and you're in this English pub, then the Tony Scott thing totally works. If it's some of the earlier awkward kind of character stuff, like when he's being shown around the station, that's all shot on wider angle lenses and closer to the actors, because then it's more just about the kind of the comedy there. So we would think about it a lot.
Now, it's funny because I had a situation on my film Death Proof where I wrote, I think one of the best parts of the script, and you read the script, is the stuff in the script where the character Pam, played by Rose McGowan, is stranded by her date. And then there's she has a big talk about it with Vanessa Ferlito, who plays Arlene Butterfly, and the date leaves her, and there's a big hole. It's one of the best sequences of the first half of the script, if not the whole script itself. And, there's no 2, 3, 4 ways about it. I did some bad direction because I engulfed the bar with a big rainstorm that was going on. And that was cool in the movie, and it was even cool for the slight thriller aspect of the fact that they're actually kind of stuck in this bar, with a killer. They don't know they're stuck in the bar with the killer, but they're you don't just get up and walk out when there's a rainstorm going on and you're stuck in a bar. And it's audibly it's interesting, visually it's very interesting, and looks really groovy. But I had some scenes take place on the back porch. Now, some of them were really good and worked really neat. But that was like a high comedy scene, and that big giant rainfall wasn't funny. It stopped it from being funny. Not only did it stop it from being funny, it actually affected Rose McGowan's performance. Because she can do that scene. I saw her, you know, when she came to the audition and she was reading it off the page. She had a really good comic timing, and it was really funny. Now she's supposed to be mad in the thing, but you know, there's mad and there's still hitting your jokes too and getting all your laughs. Because this rain is slightly oppressive and everything like that, all of a sudden the humor went out of it. She was just mad. She was angry.
Well, this is a very similar thing. Is that I always like, you know, and if you look into conventional studio comedies, they're very overlit.
Well, I mean,
they're very bright, and it's kind of there's that kind of.
It's the thing you make fun of about comedies is like a comedy has to look like shit, all right, in order to be funny.
Now the weird thing is that I'm always against that.
Me too.
But what is interesting is there were moments in this where, like, sort of, Jess, who is a brilliant DP, would be kind of like, sort of, he would kind of be lighting it for the drama of the scene, and then in some places I'd have to remind him that it's a comedy too, and the key thing is I need to see all of Simon's face.
Oh, yeah.
Now that doesn't mean I want it to be sitcom lighting, but if Simon is kind of like Rembrandt style, like sort of chiaroscuro and half his face in shadow, you're like robbing him of like 50% of his powers, you know, because you can't see what he's doing. And there'd be scenes, but not so much here, but definitely in the pub and the hotel lobby where they'd have to kind of like keep it moody to work for the spookiness or the atmosphere of the pub, but make
not
sure
on his face.
You got to see the whole face.
Yeah.
You know.
I mean, you know, that's one of those things, you know what? To tell you the truth, I love the fact that all the guns have tags hanging off of it.
I know.
From the evidence room that have never been used before.
You know where I kind of got that from? Well, there was that thing that, they're all from the evidence room, but there used to be Spike Milligan used to have a TV series called Q, and there was one thing that there was a joke in it that was never referred to, that was just really weird, is that all of the costumes from the BBC costume department would all have their tag still on them.
Oh, yeah.
And nobody ever referred to it.
Yeah.
It'd just be like if they were doing an Elizabethan sketch, they'd all be wearing Elizabethan costumes, but they'd all have like the
a little tag with a safety pin holding it
with
there.
8C, and they'd just be left on there, and it would never be referred to. I always thought it looked kind of cool, and I thought it would look. It immediately robs the Brit cops of their badassness.
Yeah. Right. Well, you know what?
That's like a classic '80s kind of like of cannon shot there. The door coming down.
Oh, and here comes your big car chase.
I know, it's funny we were talking about this before.
In fact, I insist we stop talking and just sit back and watch a British car chase.
Well, there's not much of it to watch. It'll be 30 seconds of silence. This is the one bit, I mentioned some of the other commentary, and I think you were very sweet to me when you went to see it again, because I sort of said it was not my least favourite bit, but it's one bit that, like, it's tough doing like a film like this on this budget, and it's also tough kind of like...
Oh, yeah.
And also a lot of these films, and I know Death Proof you didn't use this, and not everybody does, but a lot of action films of this ilk have like a dedicated second unit who are just doing this stuff, and we kind of half did that, but also, you know, like that's one of the things that I feel, you know, like, you know, if I'm doing an action film, I want to do the action. I don't want anybody else to it.
That's my joke about, like, if I'm doing a porno film, I'm not going to let you do the fuck scenes. I want to shoot every cum shot myself.
even in like sort of even the Scatman Mike scene.
Yeah, hey, even Drill Bill. All right. Any scene in Drill Bill not shot by me is unsatisfactory by its very definition.
But this thing in here, we pretty much like we didn't have we maybe had like, I don't know, like 2 or 3 days like to kind of shoot stuff, and there's just like all I wanted to do is like add a bit more like sort of like a shattered back glass, shattered windscreen, just a bit more kind of glass and mess and chaos. I like this shot. Yeah, it was fun.
What actually the shots that I loved, and I did them a couple times, that they never ended up making the movie, but I loved them because they were the shots that I just kept thinking about from the first chase in Mad Max, which is actually one of my favorite chases of all time. Not Mad Max 2, not the big truck chase, even though I love that, but that first chase in Mad Max.
The Knight Rider.
Oh, the Knight Rider.
Yeah.
Remember him when you look at the night sky.
I've always wondered in Mad Max, there's a point where the Knight Rider, I don't know which one came first, but he's saying AC/DC lyrics as he's driving.
Oh, he is?
He's going, "I'm hotter than a rolling dice," which is from an AC/DC song, and I was kind of wondering which came first.
Now, okay, I want to bring up something about this in particular, but let me finish my point. Was you just had those cool shots that I love, and actually you pulled them off, and I wasn't quite able to pull them off. Was those like extreme close-ups that actually zoom into the eyes?
Oh yeah.
No, was the car wasn't moving when you would do those?
No.
Right?
It moves so fast when you crash zoom like that, and if you cut it really tight, you can't tell the camera isn't moving.
Okay, now I have to bring up something about this because you actually do something in this scene where they're fighting in the miniature village. That that was funny. I'm sorry. All right. You do something in this that I actually had such a Jones that I wanted to do in Kill Bill. Was one of my favorite fight scenes of all time is in War of the Gargantuans.
Oh, I never seen that.
All right, yeah, that's one of the Ishiro Honda Japanese monster movies. In Japan, Japan, it's called Sanda vs. Gaida. But it's basically like a lot of the kung fu films. All right, kung fu films, excuse me. It's like a lot of the big giant Tokyo monster movies where they're big giant battle royale, amongst the city of Tokyo as a backdrop and destroying houses, and Tokyo Bay is always there. And I just had a thing, because of all the different types of movies, and especially Asian movies, I was like making things of in Kill Bill. One of the types of movies I didn't get a chance to deal with was the Ishiro Honda Toho science fiction films. And in my brain, if I could have come up with a way for the bride and the L drivers fight, if I could have come up with some, and again, we're talking about Kill Bill, all right, which doesn't really take place on planet Earth. If I could have come up with some way that realistically in that universe, not our universe, in that universe, they could have taken a pill and then grown 20 feet high and had their big giant battle royale amongst the town and destroying buildings, I would have done it. I couldn't figure out a way to do it, and you did.
Well, it's funny, this kind of came up latterly, I remember vividly that I knew that the end of the film had to be a mano-a-mano fight with Angel and Skinner, and I knew it had to have kind of Frank coming back, and actually before even the miniature village, I'd already had the idea that somebody was impaled but not fatally. So I thought I'd never seen that in anything where you always see a friend get impaled, but you don't see somebody survive.
Right.
And you see those horrible kind of images that you get in those magazines of Bizarre and things like that, where people impaled on fences.
Yeah.
But then I think we were in the office and we had a little model, like one of those tiny kind of sort of miniatures of a police car. And then I kind of thought, Model Village.
Yeah. And
then as soon as we had that, we took the rest of the afternoon off.
That's a good idea. Don't tax God too harshly. But he just gave me a gift, now let's go have a pint.
What's funny is that this town, my hometown, doesn't have a model village. There's a lot of places in the UK where you have them, and we visited a lot for research, and we went around all of the model villages that we'd been to as kids and stuff, and that were near where we grew up. But this what's weird is the people from my hometown watched this film and sort of said, "Where the fuck is that?" Where did that come from? We didn't even film that bit in Wales. We shot that in London.
I wouldn't be surprised if all of a sudden a model village doesn't appear all of a sudden in your hometown.
But it was fun shooting this. What was funny was that Elizabeth, the sequel to Elizabeth, The Golden Age, was filming literally one field over. Was Kate Blanchett and co and Shekhar Kapoor kind of sort of in Elizabethan kind of regalia. It was funny. But this is we shot all of this before Oh,
well, you told me a story about Bill Nye wanted one more joke. What was the one more joke?
The one more joke was he basically he said that he wouldn't. He was kind of Bill wasn't really sort of he was worried about he'd done too many cameos, and he'd done a couple of cameos and things, and he sort of said to me, which was really sweet, he goes, "I'm just worried if I do another cameo, nobody will ever want me to do a proper part again." And I was going, "Oh, you're going to do it for us, man. This would be really cool." And he goes, and I'd given him on Pirates of the Caribbean, I'd given him in his trailer, I made him as for a present or something. I made him a rock playlist, of new rock bands, because he likes kind of the Rolling Stones.
Yeah.
I'd put him onto John Spencer Blues Explosion. He goes, "What are the bands that like John Spencer Blues Explosion?" I said, "Oh, I'll make you a playlist." So I made him sing, and he sort of said, "All the kids in the makeup trailer thought I was the coolest guy around with your playlist." So I sort of said, "Okay, here's the deal. Will you do the part for another rock playlist?" And he said, "And one more joke." And the one more joke was him saying when he says, he goes, "You can't just make people disappear." And Bill Nye goes, "Yes, I can. I'm the chief inspector." And that was the line. So it was easy. There was job done. I like those kind of. I like that kind of sort of bartering kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like, so the idea of
Yeah.
like more joke. Yeah, sure.
More joke, hey, that helps me out.
It's funny, like
I'll go back to the drawing board and maybe think about one more.
now you can't go wrong with blowing up a miniature here.
No, not at all.
This is real model. You cannot go wrong with blowing up a miniature.
Hey, you're right.
And what's fun, I don't know if you've ever done any miniature stuff, but what's amazing with them is that they go, you're shooting that at 90 frames per second or more, maybe like it was 120 frames per second. When you actually like explode, it looks so pathetic in real time. It goes,
Yeah.
like that. And then when you come back and they had all the tiles and all the, Artem who did the models, you just see all the tiles come off. It's amazing.
Like, we now return you to hope and glory already.
Yeah,
Progress.
it is like hope. You know what's funny? This is the rubble from Children of Men.
Oh, really?
Children of Men had shot here 3 weeks before, and I knew the producer, and I knew Alfonso, and I sort of rang up the producer and said, "Hey, can we nick some of your rubble for a poor British film?"
Okay, now we're coming to the end of the thing. I just have to mention, okay, from time to time, I've been doing a real whipped British accent through here. It hasn't been into me insulting anybody, and I haven't even been trying to. I've just been in Britain for 2 weeks now, so all the expressions are just in my mind, all right, and in my vocabulary. So it just keeps coming out that way, like I'm doing a Don Cheadle or a Dick Van Dyke. Or, what I call Don Van Dyke is what I've been doing.
The Don Van Dyke.
The
should
Don
now be-
Van Dyke.
Dick Van Dyke has held the title for too long. It's time to give Don Cheadle his props.
Dick Van Dyke has held it for a long time. It took somebody of substance to take his lousy British accent mantle away, and Don Cheadle proved to be just the man.
Oh man, you know what's funny is the sort of what's funny is because everybody talks in a regional accent. In the States, sometimes people sort of say, "Is that a real accent? It sounds kind of retarded." I said, "Yeah, that's my hometown." Hey, that's my hometown you're talking about, huh? This is like, the end of the film. This is, and like I said, he has become the fascist enforcer.
Yeah.
He's become our fascist super cop. You know, it's funny.
And by the way, if this was the 80s, this would be the lead up to the pilot. There will be Hot Fuzz, the pilot, but next year, this coming year, actually, coming up in about 3 months, would be the Hot Fuzz TV show.
Oh, no, absolutely. Somebody was saying to me the other day, I was in Toronto at the film festival, and this guy said that he had like a night of music where they only played like songs from films that mentioned the film in the title, and there was a whole bunch of them. And I was trying to think of them. I was thinking, oh, Hot Fuzz.
Yeah.
It's like, so John Spencer mentions Hot Fuzz about 1 million times.
Well, one of the things actually I heard, I don't know if this is true, but I believe it. Apparently, for years, Penn Jillette of Penn and Teller fame used to have a little movie club that they would meet at one of the all-night diners in Times Square. And actually, if you just wanted to go, you didn't even need to be invited by them. You just had to know they were going to be there, and you can meet and join them. And then they would go see whatever new movie was playing at the Times Square Theater. And the thing is, if ever the title of the movie was said, they would stand up in the theater and applaud.
Oh, man.
Now, John Waters says the greatest title ever said on screen in the history of movies is for the Joseph Lucy, Richard Burton, Liz Taylor fiasco boom. Where actually Richard Burton turns to the camera and goes, boom.
I'd like to bring in 2 more recent contenders for that.
Please.
Number 1 would be the Wolfgang Peterson film, The Perfect Storm. Where at a point in the film, Christopher McDonald, I think it is, who plays a weatherman, sort of looks at a map on a computer, like the sort of the building storm, and goes, "This could be," track in, "The Perfect Storm." The other one I have to say, having recently seen it, is the 3rd in Dario Argento's Mother's trilogy, The Mother of Tears. It mentions the Mother of Tears a hell of a lot. Like in the last 5 minutes of the film, they get to the lair of the Mother of Tears, and Dario Argento says, "This is the lair of the Mother of Tears." Hey!
At some point, Penn and Juliet might just sit down. Okay, we'll let these last 7 references go off.
Now, is it true that on the kind of like sort of deleted scenes of Pulp Fiction that we've never seen, there's a scene just as John Travolta and Samuel L. Jackson walking out goes, huh, this is some kind of Pulp Fiction, huh? Hey!
No one says Reservoir Dogs. Reservoir Dogs, I have to point that out.
There's some kind of Reservoir Dogs in here, right? Hey! Oh, that's funny. Well, you know what's funny? Going back to the focus group thing, John Spencer did this track, Here Comes the Fuzz, at the end. Now, I met him in New York. He came to see the film at that test screening with his wife and really liked it. And, you know, he was asking how did it go. I said, oh, yeah, it went really good. And there was this discussion about the title and changing it. And he goes, Hot Fuzz is a cool title, man. I said, I know, it'd be great. So he sort of said, what do you want the song to be about? I said, well, you can talk about the plot, you know, say whatever you like. So, like, he actually mentions the title over and over and over again, almost as a way of willing it back into existence. Even to the point where in the lyrics on this song here, he's going, here come the fuzz. That's what they're called, Hot Fuzz. He just keeps mentioning it.
Why is it called Hot Fuzz? Just stay for the closing credits and you'll find out. Actually, I have to say it's actually kind of funny because normally, I remember there was a day when you would do these, and as soon as, you know, directed by or whatever would show up, then people, okay, well, thank you very much for tuning in. See you guys next time, all right? Now this shit is like 10 minutes long. Hey, you got 10 minutes more to talk. Keep talking, keep talking.
I know. It's weird. I'm not, so on both Sean and Hot Fuzz, I've never had like kind of I've never had like a credit sequence where I had all the kind of things.
Kathy Nelson. You know Kathy?
I never met Kathy. That's the weird thing.
One of those sleazy people.
Now she works with you, right?
Oh, I love Kathy Nelson, but yeah, one of those people you never met. No, but managed to get her goddamn name on your film.
Kathy, if you're listening, call me. And Billy.
I like it, Kathy. I'm making fun of the process.
This is what's cool here. There's some good ones here. Hostage Situation from the motion picture Bad Boys 2. I like that.
Actually, almost all my... A good half of my music titles are so-and-so, you know, Random Violence from the motion picture part of the Crystal Plumage.
There's a good one. For DVD cover from Extreme Prejudice.
Again, a terrific Walter Hill movie.
Yeah, absolutely. No, actually...
Walter Hill
here, your name's coming out any second now. There you go. Summerfield Supermarkets and Quentin Tarantino. That is a credit.
Scarlett Sheriff is right above me.
Scarlett Sheriff, yeah. She was the little girl who played the hostage in the hostage scene.
Awesome. And she didn't get a proper credit?
She was... You can barely see her.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, Scarlett. If you're listening, call me. Actually, she's 9. Forget
it. Call me in a couple of years.
2 years. No, make it 10 years. Forget it. It's off. 8 years.